Welcome, fellow dreamer. Tonight, we journey through the story of telescopes, how humanity first turned curious eyes toward the heavens, and how brilliant minds refined these instruments to reveal the cosmos in breathtaking detail. This tale unfolds with soothing music and abstract imagery, gently uncovering little-known wonders and fascinating stories that will feed your curiosity as you drift peacefully towards sleep. So take a deep breath, sink into comfort, and let both your mind and eyes rest as we explore the revolutionary discoveries that transformed our understanding of space and time. Long before the first lens was ever ground, before glass was shaped to bend light and reveal distant worlds, humanity gazed upward with nothing but the naked eye and an insatiable curiosity. On clear nights in ancient times, when darkness fell more completely than we can easily imagine today, the sky transformed into a vast tapestry of light. Thousands upon thousands of stars emerged against the black vault above, and our ancestors watched, wondered, and gradually began to understand. The night sky was not merely beautiful to these early observers. It was a clock, a calendar, and a map. It marked the passage of seasons, guided travelers across featureless deserts and open seas, and whispered secrets about the nature of existence itself. But understanding these celestial patterns required more than casual glancing upward. It demanded patience, meticulous attention, and the dedication to record what was seen night after night, year after year, generation after generation. In ancient Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Babylonian astronomers maintained careful watch over the heavens as early as the second millennium before the Common Era. These observers, often priests who studied the sky from the step towers called ziggurats, developed sophisticated methods for tracking the movements of celestial bodies. They noticed that most stars maintained fixed positions relative to one another, wheeling overhead in predictable patterns as the seasons changed. But they also identified the wanderers, those bright points of light that moved against the background of fixed stars. We know them now as planets, a word derived from the Greek term for wanderer. The Babylonians recorded their observations on clay tablets in cuneiform script, creating some of humanity's earliest astronomical records. They tracked the movements of Venus with particular care, noting its appearances as both morning and evening star. They developed mathematical methods to predict celestial events, including lunar eclipses, demonstrating that the heavens followed patterns that could be understood and anticipated. Their devotion to systematic observation created a foundation of knowledge that would be built upon for millennia to come. Far to the southwest, along the fertile banks of the Nile, Egyptian astronomers developed their own sophisticated understanding of the sky. The regular flooding of the Nile, which brought life-giving silt to the agricultural lands, coincided with the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, when it first became visible on the eastern horizon just before dawn, after a period of invisibility. The Egyptians used this astronomical event to mark the beginning of their year, demonstrating how celestial observations could be woven into the practical rhythms of life. The Egyptians aligned their great monuments with celestial precision. The pyramids of Giza, built around 4,500 years ago, show remarkable astronomical alignments. The sides of the Great Pyramid align closely with true north, south, east, and west, an achievement requiring careful observation of the stars. Inside, narrow shafts pointed towards significant stars, creating connections between the earthly tomb and the eternal heavens. These ancient engineers possessed no telescopes, no precision instruments beyond their eyes, and simple tools for measuring angles and marking positions. Yet they achieved alignments that still impress modern observers. In ancient Greece, philosophers and mathematicians transformed astronomical observation into a more theoretical pursuit, seeking not just to record what they saw, but to explain why the heavens behaved as they did. Aristotle proposed that Earth stood at the center of the cosmos, with the moon, sun, planets, and stars embedded in crystalline spheres that rotated around our world. This geocentric model seemed to match what the naked eye could observe, and it would dominate astronomical thinking for nearly 2,000 years. Hipparchus, working in the 2nd century before the Common Era, created one of the first comprehensive star catalogues, recording the positions and brightness of over 800 stars. He made his observations from the island of Rhodes using instruments like the dioptra, essentially a sighting tube that could be pointed at celestial objects to measure their positions with greater accuracy than the unaided eye alone. Hipparchus also discovered the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble in Earth's axis that causes the position of the celestial poles to shift over thousands of years. This discovery required not just his own careful observations, but comparison with records made by earlier observers, demonstrating how astronomical knowledge accumulated across generations. Far to the east, Chinese astronomers maintained their own independent tradition of celestial observation stretching back thousands of years. Imperial astronomers kept meticulous records of unusual celestial events, including comets, meteors, and what they called guest stars, sudden bright points of light that appeared where none had been before, and then gradually faded. Modern astronomers recognize these guest star records as observations of supernovae, exploding stars whose light can briefly outshine entire galaxies. The Chinese recorded a notable guest star in the year 1054, visible even in daylight. Today we know this was a supernova, the remnant of which we can now see as the Crab Nebula, though that discovery would have to wait for the invention of telescopes. These ancient observers used various techniques to enhance the precision of their naked eye observations. They created instruments to measure angles in the sky using plumb lines and calibrated scales. They built structures with carefully aligned openings through which sunlight would fall in specific ways on particular days, creating astronomical calendars in stone. They used water clocks to time celestial events, measuring how long it took for stars to cross certain positions in the sky. They drew detailed maps of the constellations, creating mythological figures from the patterns of stars to help remember and communicate their position. Yet for all their ingenuity and dedication, these ancient astronomers faced fundamental limitations. The human eye, remarkable though it is, can only perceive stars down to about 6th magnitude in darkness, away from artificial light. Beyond that threshold, countless stars remained invisible. Fine details on the surfaces of the moon and planets could not be discerned. The true nature of the fuzzy patches visible here and there among the stars remained mysterious, and the vast majority of the universe, too distant or too faint for human eyes to detect, remained utterly unknown. Still, working within these constraints, ancient astronomers achieved remarkable things. They proved that the heavens followed knowable patterns. They measured the length of the year with impressive accuracy. They predicted eclipses and planetary positions. They created the conceptual frameworks, the mathematical tools, and the observational disciplines that would support all later astronomy. Their patient watching of the skies, with nothing but their eyes and their minds, demonstrated that the universe was comprehensible, that human beings could unlock its secrets through careful attention and systematic thought. As centuries passed and civilizations rose and fell, this accumulated astronomical wisdom was preserved, transmitted, and expanded. The knowledge that began in ancient Mesopotamia traveled to Greece, was preserved and enhanced by Islamic scholars during medieval times, and eventually reached Renaissance Europe. Each generation of observers added to the understanding of those who came before, creating an ever more detailed picture of the cosmos. Yet even as this knowledge grew, the fundamental tool remained unchanged. Astronomy was still what the eye could see, limited by the physical constraints of human vision. What was needed was something that could extend the reach of the human eye, that could gather more light, that could magnify distant objects and reveal details too fine for unaided vision to perceive. What was needed was a revolution in seeing itself, a new kind of eye that could peer deeper into the cosmos than nature had equipped us to look. That revolution was approaching, though it would emerge not from astronomy itself, but from a craftsman learning to shape glass in new and remarkable ways. The story of how humanity learned to see farther begins not with the telescope itself, but with something far simpler: glass. In the warm glow of furnaces scattered across medieval Europe and the Islamic world, craftsmen were discovering secrets that would eventually unlock the heavens. They worked with sand and ash and fire, coaxing these humble materials into transparency, creating windows through which light could pass transformed. Glass had been made for thousands of years, of course. The ancient Egyptians and Romans knew its beauty, fashioning vessels and decorative objects. But the glass of those early times was often cloudy, filled with imperfections, colored by impurities. What changed in the centuries following the fall of Rome was the gradual refinement of technique, the patient accumulation of knowledge about how different ingredients affected the final product. In the great centers of Islamic learning, scholars studied optics and the behavior of light, while craftsmen experimented with ever purer materials. Venice became famous for its crystal-clear glass, produced on the island of Murano, where techniques were jealously guarded secrets. Yet it was not the clarity alone that mattered for the future of astronomy. It was the shape. Somewhere in the monasteries and workshops of the 13th century, people began to notice something remarkable about pieces of glass that were curved in particular ways. A simple hemisphere of clear glass, flat on one side and rounded on the other, could make letters appear larger when placed over a page. These reading stones, as they came to be called, were small miracles for aging monks struggling with fading eyesight and dim candlelight. They required no great theoretical understanding, just the practical observation that curved, transparent material did something useful to light. The reading stone was thick and cumbersome, useful only when laid directly upon a surface, but the principle it demonstrated was profound. Light, when passing through curved glass, bent. The Latin word lens comes from the resemblance of these curved pieces to lentil seeds, and like seeds, they contained within them the potential for extraordinary growth. By the late 13th century, craftsmen in Italy had made another leap. Instead of laying glass upon the page, they began mounting shaped lenses in frames that could be held before the eyes or balanced on the nose. These spectacles spread gradually through Europe, becoming more common as the demand for reading increased among scholars, merchants, and clerks. The making of spectacles created a new profession, the lens grinder, an artisan who needed both steady hands and an intuitive understanding of how to shape glass to correct different visual problems. These lens makers worked by feel and by trial, grinding and polishing pieces of glass against stone or metal forms, checking their work by looking through them, adjusting and refining. Some lenses were convex, bulging outward, useful for those who struggled to see nearby objects clearly. Others were concave, curving inward, helpful for different visual challenges. The craftsman learned that the degree of curvature mattered enormously. Too much or too little, and the lens would be useless. The glass needed to be smooth, free of scratches and bubbles, uniform in its curve. This knowledge accumulated slowly, passed from master to apprentice in workshops across Europe. The Netherlands, with its traditions of fine craftsmanship and its growing cities filled with literate merchants and administrators, became a center of spectacle making. By the late 16th century, cities like Middelburg and Alkmaar housed numerous lens makers, their shops displaying arrays of spectacles for customers to try, each ground to slightly different specifications. The lens makers were learning, though they might not have expressed it in these terms, to control the refraction of light. When light passes from air into glass, it slows down and changes direction. The angle of this change depends on the curve of the surface it encounters. A convex lens causes parallel rays of light passing through it to converge, meeting at a point called the focus. A concave lens causes rays to diverge, spreading apart as if they had come from a point behind the lens. These properties, studied theoretically by scholars like Roger Bacon and later by Johannes Kepler, were understood practically by the craftsmen who earned their living shaping glass. In the Islamic world, similar developments were unfolding, building on the optical studies of scholars like Ibn al-Haytham, known in Europe as Al-Hazan. His 11th century work on optics described how light travels in straight lines, how it reflects and refracts, and how the eye perceives images. This knowledge spread through translations, mingling with European discoveries, creating a growing understanding of how vision worked and how it might be assisted or enhanced. What no one had yet done, as the 16th century drew to a close, was to combine lenses in a very particular way. Spectacles used a single lens for each eye. Reading stones were solitary pieces of glass, but two lenses, arranged at just the right distance from one another, could accomplish something neither could do alone. They could make distant objects appear closer, pulling far-off details into clear view. The theoretical possibility existed in the knowledge of the time. The practical materials were available in the workshops of lens makers who had spent generations perfecting their craft. The glass was clear enough, the grinding techniques refined enough, the understanding of curved surfaces adequate for the task. All that was needed was for someone to arrange two lenses in a tube and look through them, to discover by accident or design that the distant world could be brought near. This moment was approaching as the year 1600 arrived. In the workshops of Dutch spectacle makers, among craftsmen who spent their days grinding and polishing glass, handling lenses of every description, the pieces were in place. The telescope was not invented by grand theoretical insight, not designed by a great scientist working from optical principles. It emerged instead from the practical knowledge of artisans, from centuries of patient work with glass and light, from the accumulated wisdom of how to make transparent materials bend the world into clearer view. The skies above waited, unchanged for millennia, filled with wonders that human eyes alone could not quite reach. But the tools that would reveal those wonders were ready, sitting in workshops and on workbenches, waiting only for the right combination, the fortunate arrangement, the moment when someone would look through two pieces of carefully curved glass and see the distance collapse. The story now takes us northward to the Low Countries, where the land meets the sea in an intricate dance of dikes and canals. In the opening years of the 17th century, the Netherlands hummed with commercial energy. Ships arrived daily, bearing exotic goods from distant shores, and workshops lined the narrow streets of prosperous towns. Among these workshops, a particular trade had flourished for generations: the crafting of spectacles. In cities like Middelburg, Amsterdam, and Alkmaar, skilled artisans ground and polished lenses with practiced hands. Their shops displayed spectacles for those whose eyes had grown weary with age or study. The techniques for shaping glass had been refined through decades of careful work, passed from master to apprentice. These craftsmen understood how different curves could magnify or reduce, how thickness affected the bending of light, how clarity depended on the purity of glass and the patience of the polisher. It was in this world of lens makers that something remarkable emerged, though the exact moment remains shrouded in competing claims and uncertain memories. The year 1608 marks the point when the telescope entered documented history. Yet 3 men would later be associated with its invention, and the truth of who first discovered the principle may never be fully known. Hans Lippershey worked as a spectacle maker in Middelburg, the capital of Zeeland province. According to later accounts, he submitted a patent application in October 1608 for a device he described as useful for seeing distant things as though they were nearby. The instrument consisted of a convex lens and a concave lens positioned at opposite ends of a tube. Through this simple arrangement, objects appeared magnified and brought closer to the viewer's eye. Lippershey demonstrated his invention before the government officials of the Dutch States General, showing how distant church towers and other structures could be seen with new clarity. The military implications were immediately apparent, and the authorities considered the device valuable for reconnaissance and naval observation. Yet Lippershey's patent application would ultimately be denied, not because the device lacked merit, but because others had apparently conceived of similar instruments around the same time. Zacharias Janssen, another spectacle maker from Middelburg, was later credited by some accounts with creating a telescope, though the evidence for his claim emerged primarily from testimony given by his son many years after the fact. The details remained vague, the dates uncertain, but the Janssen name became linked with the invention nonetheless. Jacob Metius, working in Alkmaar, also submitted a claim for a similar device around the same period. He described his invention as something he had developed independently, unaware that others, Iamese, had conceived the same idea. The government officials found themselves facing multiple inventors presenting variations on the same theme, all within a remarkably short span of time. This convergence suggests something important about the nature of invention. The telescope did not spring from a single moment of isolated genius, but rather emerged from a craft tradition where many skilled workers understood lenses intimately. The necessary knowledge had been quietly accumulating in workshops for generations. Once lens grinding reached a certain level of sophistication, and once enough craftsmen had experimented with combining lenses in various ways, the telescope's invention became almost inevitable. Several individuals, working independently, crossed the threshold at nearly the same moment. The device itself was wonderfully simple. A tube, usually made of wood or rolled leather, held two lenses in alignment. The objective lens at the far end gathered light from distant objects. The eyepiece lens, near the observer's eye, magnified the image formed by the objective. The early Dutch telescopes offered modest magnification, perhaps 3 or 4 times. But this was sufficient to reveal details invisible to the naked eye alone. Ships at sea could be identified at greater distances. The features of buildings far across the landscape became discernible. Soldiers approaching from afar could be counted and assessed. Word of this perspective glass, or looker, spread rapidly through the networks of European commerce and correspondence. The Dutch Republic, despite its efforts to control the device for military advantage, could not contain the knowledge. The principle was too simple, the construction too straightforward. Within months, versions of the telescope appeared in France, in Italy, in England, in the German states. Craftsmen who heard descriptions of the device could often reproduce it with minimal instruction, drawing on their existing knowledge of lenses and optical principles. Initial uses focused almost entirely on terrestrial observation. Merchants saw value in spotting incoming ships before competitors. Military commanders recognized the tactical advantage of enhanced reconnaissance. Curious nobles purchased telescopes as fascinating novelties, sweeping them across the countryside from their estates. The instruments appeared in markets and at fairs, demonstrated by enterprising sellers who understood the appeal of bringing distant scenes close. The quality of these early telescopes varied considerably. Some produced clear, bright images within the limits of their modest magnification. Others suffered from distortions, blurred edges, or poor alignment that made viewing frustrating. The best instruments came from skilled lens makers who applied their practiced judgment to selecting glass, determining the proper curves, and positioning the lenses precisely. The difference between a well-made telescope and a poor one was immediately apparent to anyone who looked through both. As these perspective glasses multiplied across Europe, they represented something more than a clever tool or military device. They embodied a new relationship between human perception and the world. For all of history, the human eye had set the limit of what could be directly observed. Distance imposed an absolute boundary on sight. Now, that boundary had shifted. The far could be brought near. The small could be enlarged. An extension of vision had been achieved through carefully shaped glass and thoughtful arrangement. Yet in these early months, as telescopes passed from hand to hand and eye to eye, almost no one thought to turn them skyward. The heavens had been observed for millennia, with naked eyes alone. The idea that a device meant for viewing ships and towers might reveal something new about the stars and planets had not yet taken hold. The telescope existed, spreading through the workshops and markets of Europe, waiting for someone to point it upward and discover that the cosmos held secrets invisible to unaided human sight. In Italian universities, in German courts, in English country estates, learned men heard rumors of the Dutch invention. Letters carried descriptions across the Alps and along the Mediterranean coast. The perspective glass was coming, and with it, though no one yet knew, a revolution in how humanity would understand the universe itself. The summer warmth of 1609 settled over the Italian countryside as news began to spread through the republics and principalities of the peninsula. Word traveled by letter, by merchant, by diplomat, and by scholar, carrying whispers of a remarkable invention that had emerged from the workshops of the Dutch. A device constructed from nothing more than two pieces of curved glass held within a simple tube could somehow bring distant objects startlingly close, making what was far away appear near at hand. Among those who heard these rumors was Galileo Galilei, a mathematician and natural philosopher residing in Padua, where he held a position at the university. At 45 years of age, Galileo had already established himself as a keen investigator of nature's secrets, a man who combined mathematical reasoning with careful observation and, when needed, skilled craftsmanship with his own hands. He had studied motion, mechanics, and the behavior of falling objects. He had tutored students in mathematics and military engineering, yet his salary remained modest, and he supplemented his income by manufacturing mathematical instruments and compasses in a workshop attached to his home. When reports reached him in July of that year, describing the Dutch perspective glass, Galileo's mind immediately grasped the significance of what such an instrument might offer. While others saw primarily a military advantage, or perhaps an amusing novelty, Galileo recognized something more. He understood that the principles of optics could be applied systematically, that careful work might yield improvements to whatever basic design the Dutch spectacle makers had stumbled upon. Without having seen one of these devices himself, Galileo set about reasoning through how it must work. His knowledge of lenses, gained from years of mathematical study and practical work with optical instruments, guided his thinking. A tube with two lenses arranged at specific distances, he concluded, one lens gathering light and the other magnifying the gathered image for the eye. The exact curvatures and positions would determine the degree of magnification achieved. In his workshop, surrounded by the tools of lens grinding and the materials of glasswork, Galileo began experimenting. He selected pieces of glass with great care, understanding that imperfections in the material would distort the final image. The grinding of each lens surface required patience and precision, working the glass against abrasive materials with methodical, circular motions, checking the curvature frequently, feeling for the correct shape as much through experience as through measurement. His first attempts produced modest results. The initial telescopes, as such instruments would come to be called, achieved magnification of perhaps 3 times, bringing distant objects 3 times closer to the eye than they appeared naturally. This matched what the Dutch artisans had accomplished. But Galileo did not stop there. He understood that better glass, more precisely shaped lenses, and optimal spacing within the tube could yield superior performance. Through the late summer and into early autumn, Galileo refined his technique. He experimented with different combinations of lenses, one convex and one concave, adjusting the distances between them. He worked to grind smoother surfaces, to achieve more perfect curvatures, to eliminate distortions that blurred the image or created false colors around objects. Each improvement built upon the last, and with each iteration, the magnification increased. By August, Galileo had produced a telescope that magnified approximately 9 times. This represented a significant achievement, tripling the power of the original Dutch design. He traveled to Venice and demonstrated this instrument to the city's leaders, climbing the campanile of San Marco and inviting the senators and merchants to observe distant ships at sea, vessels that appeared hours before they could be seen with the unaided eye. The practical value was immediately apparent. Ships could be identified as friend or foe long before they reached harbor. Approaching merchants could be recognized, giving advance notice for business preparations. The Venetian authorities were impressed. They understood the strategic advantage such an instrument provided to a maritime republic whose wealth and security depended on sea trade. They rewarded Galileo with an improved contract at the university and expressions of gratitude for presenting them with this valuable tool. Yet even as he received acclaim for this practical application, Galileo continued his work in private. He was not satisfied with 9 times magnification. Through the autumn months, he pushed his craft further, grinding lenses with even greater care, testing different glass compositions, adjusting and readjusting the configuration of his instruments. 20 times magnification, 25 times. By the end of the year, he had achieved approximately 30 times magnification, an unprecedented level of optical power. The quality of the image mattered as much as the degree of magnification. A blurry image enlarged 30 times offered little advantage over a sharp image enlarged less. Galileo's mathematical mind understood this principle, and his craftsman's hands worked to create lenses that produced clear, distinct images even at high magnification. The edges of objects remained crisp. Details that would have been lost in inferior instruments remained visible. As winter approached and the nights grew longer, Galileo made a decision that would alter the course of human understanding. The telescope had been created for viewing distant objects on Earth, for military and naval purposes, for observing ships and soldiers, and fortifications across miles of terrestrial distance. Everyone who had encountered the device had used it this way, pointing it horizontally across landscapes and seascapes. But Galileo chose to direct his improved instrument upward. On clear evenings when the sky darkened and stars emerged overhead, he carried his telescope outside. The heavens had been observed for thousands of years by countless eyes, their patterns memorized, their movements tracked, their appearances documented in careful detail. Yet all of this had been done with nothing more than the natural human eye, that remarkable but limited organ that had evolved to navigate an earthly environment, not to penetrate cosmic distances. Now, for the first time, enhanced vision would be brought to bear on the celestial realm. Galileo steadied his telescope, working out the challenges of aiming such an instrument at objects overhead, learning to track them as Earth's rotation slowly carried them across the field of view. He adjusted the focus, bringing distant light to a sharp point within the tube. And then he looked. The transformation was immediate and profound. What had been points of light became disks. What had been smooth became textured. What had been empty sky revealed itself to be filled with previously invisible detail. In those first moments of telescopic observation, the universe disclosed secrets it had kept hidden throughout all of human history. The moon, that familiar companion that had hung in Earth's sky since before memory, suddenly appeared as it had never been seen before. No longer a smooth, luminous circle, it showed features, variations in brightness, irregularities along the boundary between light and shadow. Galileo's trained eye recognized what he was seeing, but the implications would require careful observation and thought to fully understand. The systematic investigation of the heavens had begun, and nothing would ever be quite the same. Having turned his improved telescope toward the heavens, Galileo Galilei stood in the cool evening air of Padua as autumn gave way to winter in 1609. The instrument he had crafted with such care was no longer merely a curiosity for viewing distant ships or faraway towers. It had become something far more profound, a key to unlock celestial secrets that had remained hidden since the dawn of human existence. On a clear November night, Galileo directed his telescope toward the moon. What he saw through the eyepiece stopped him in his careful observations. The lunar surface, which had appeared to the naked eye as a smooth, luminous disk, revealed itself to be something entirely unexpected. The boundary between the illuminated portion and the dark region, what astronomers call the terminator, was not a smooth, regular curve as one might expect from a perfect sphere. Instead, it appeared ragged and irregular, interrupted by countless irregularities that caught and reflected the sun's light in fascinating ways. Night after night, Galileo returned to his observations of the moon, watching as the terminator crept across its face with the lunar phases. What he witnessed challenged centuries of accepted wisdom. The ancient Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle, had taught that celestial bodies were fundamentally different from Earth. Perfect, unchanging spheres of a fifth element, unknown in our terrestrial realm. The moon, being the closest celestial body, was thought to be perfectly smooth and spherical, perhaps made of some crystalline substance that reflected the sun's light with pristine uniformity. But through Galileo's telescope, an entirely different moon emerged. He observed bright points of light that appeared on the dark side of the terminator, separated from the illuminated portion by bands of shadow. As he watched over subsequent nights, these bright points grew, and eventually merged with the advancing wall of sunlight. This behavior could mean only one thing. These were the peaks of mountains, catching the first rays of dawn, while the valleys below remained in darkness, just as alpine peaks on Earth glow with morning light, while lower elevations still slumber in shadow. The implications were staggering. If the moon had mountains, it was a world with topography, with heights and depths, with features that could be measured and mapped. Galileo, trained in mathematics and proportion, set about calculating the heights of these lunar mountains. By measuring how far the bright peaks appeared from the terminator and applying geometric principles, he estimated that some lunar mountains rose to heights comparable to or even exceeding those on Earth. He also noticed darker regions on the moon's surface, which appeared smoother than the rugged highlands. These dark plains, which earlier observers had sometimes interpreted as continents and seas of water, now revealed themselves under magnification as relatively flat expanses, though still marked by smaller features and irregularities. The brighter regions showed the most dramatic terrain, with countless circular formations that we now recognize as impact craters, though Galileo did not yet understand their origin. With the careful eye of both scientist and artist, Galileo began creating detailed drawings of what he observed. Using pen and wash techniques, he captured the play of light and shadow across the lunar surface, rendering the three-dimensional quality of mountains and valleys with remarkable skill. These illustrations were not merely artistic interpretations, but scientific documents, recording observations that could be verified by others and compared across different nights as the lighting conditions changed. His drawings revealed another crucial insight. The lunar surface was not merely irregular, but was covered with circular depressions of various sizes. The larger formations showed clearly defined rims that cast shadows when the sun struck them at oblique angles. Some of these circular features had raised centers, creating complex patterns of light and shadow that changed dramatically as the terminator moved across them. While Galileo did not fully grasp that these were impact scars from ancient collisions, he recognized them as permanent features of a complex lunar landscape. As December arrived and the nights grew longer and colder, Galileo continued his lunar observations with growing excitement. Each viewing session revealed new details as different portions of the moon caught the sunlight at varying angles. He noted that features near the lunar equator appeared differently than those toward the poles, and that some regions seemed rougher and more mountainous than others. The moon was revealing itself to be a genuine world, with geography as varied and complex as Earth's own surface. The philosophical implications of these observations occupied Galileo's thoughts as much as the observations themselves. If the moon was not perfect and crystalline, but rough and mountainous like Earth, then perhaps the sharp distinction between celestial and terrestrial realms was not as absolute as ancient philosophy had claimed. Perhaps the heavens were made of ordinary matter, subject to the same principles and composed of the same substances as our own world. This represented a fundamental shift in thinking about the nature of the cosmos. In early 1610, as winter deepened, Galileo prepared to share these lunar observations with the wider world. He recognized that what he had witnessed through his telescope challenged deeply held beliefs about the perfection of celestial spheres. Yet the evidence was clear and could be verified by anyone who looked through a similar instrument. The moon was not a smooth, perfect globe, but a world of mountains and valleys, of heights and depths, of terrain that shifted from rugged highlands to smoother plains. These observations of lunar mountains and craters represented just the beginning of Galileo's telescopic revelations. Even as he refined his drawings and calculations of lunar topography, he continued to sweep his telescope across the night sky, examining other celestial objects with the same careful attention he had devoted to the moon. The heavens were yielding their secrets to patient observation and improved vision, and Galileo sensed that more discoveries awaited among the countless stars and wandering planets visible in the winter sky above Padua. The moon, Earth's constant companion through the ages, had finally revealed its true face to human eyes, showing itself to be not a perfect celestial sphere, but a genuine world with landscape and character all its own. The winter evenings of January 1610 found Galileo returning night after night to his rooftop observation post in Padua, wrapped warmly against the cold air that helped steady the atmosphere. His observations of the moon had already shown him that the heavens were not as the ancient philosophers had described them, but on the seventh day of that new year, he turned his improved telescope toward Jupiter, the brilliant wandering star that shone with steady golden light in the evening sky. What he saw puzzled him immediately. Near the bright disk of Jupiter, arranged in a nearly straight line passing through the planet, were three small stars. They were not particularly remarkable in themselves, certainly fainter than many stars visible to the naked eye, but their arrangement caught his attention. The precision-minded mathematician in Galileo noted their positions carefully in his observation journal, marking which side of Jupiter each appeared on and estimating their distances from the planet. The following night, January 8th, he returned to Jupiter, expecting to see the same configuration, perhaps shifted slightly as Jupiter continued its slow movement against the background stars. What he found instead startled him. All three of the small stars were now on the western side of the planet, where previously they had been distributed on both sides. Had Jupiter somehow moved backward in its orbit, passing the stars in the opposite direction than expected? This seemed unlikely, contradicting all established understanding of planetary motion. Cloudy skies prevented observation on the 9th, and we can imagine Galileo's impatience as he waited for the weather to clear. When he next viewed Jupiter on January 10th, only two of the companion stars were visible, both on the eastern side of the planet. The third had seemingly vanished, perhaps hidden behind Jupiter itself. A suspicion was beginning to form in his mind, an idea that seemed almost too remarkable to believe. Night after night, through the remainder of January, Galileo tracked these mysterious points of light. Sometimes there were three visible, sometimes four, occasionally only two or one. They moved from one side of Jupiter to the other, sometimes appearing farther from the planet, sometimes closer. They never strayed far into the surrounding sky, remaining always in Jupiter's immediate vicinity. Gradually, through careful measurement and calculation, the truth revealed itself with crystalline clarity. These were not background stars at all. They were celestial bodies orbiting Jupiter, just as the moon orbited Earth. The implications of this discovery rippled outward like waves on still water. For centuries, One of the primary arguments against the Copernican model of the solar system had been a seemingly logical question. If Earth moved through space, how could the Moon possibly keep up with it? Would Earth not leave its satellite behind? The accepted Ptolemaic system, with Earth stationary at the center of everything, seemed to answer this problem elegantly. Everything orbited Earth because Earth was the natural center of all motion. But here, visible through Galileo's telescope, was Jupiter moving through the heavens, accompanied by not one, but 4 moons that had no difficulty whatsoever keeping pace with their planet. The giant world swept through space, carrying its retinue of satellites with it, demonstrating beyond doubt that a celestial body could have moons while simultaneously traveling through the cosmos. If Jupiter could do this, then surely Earth could as well. Galileo continued his observations with systematic dedication, tracking the positions of what he began calling the Medicean stars. In honor of his potential patron, Cosimo II de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Each night's measurements added to the growing body of evidence. He began to calculate the orbital periods of these moons, noting that the innermost traveled fastest, completing its circuit in less than 2 days, while the outermost took more than 2 weeks. The regularity of these motions spoke to mathematical laws governing celestial mechanics. Here were small worlds following predictable paths, tiny celestial clockworks visible through his telescope. Sometimes one moon would pass in front of another from his perspective, their motions independent, yet harmonious. Occasionally, a moon would disappear as it passed into Jupiter's shadow, winking out of existence for a time before emerging on the other side. We might pause to consider what it meant to be the only human being who knew these moons existed. For all of recorded history, humans had looked at Jupiter and seen only a bright point of light. Now Galileo alone understood that this wandering star was actually a world accompanied by its own system of satellites. The intimacy of this knowledge, the isolation of being the sole witness to these celestial companions, must have filled those cold January nights with a peculiar mixture of excitement and solitude. The technical achievement of even seeing these moons should not be understated. The brightest of Jupiter's satellites are just barely visible to exceptionally sharp naked eyes under perfect conditions, appearing not as distinct objects, but as a slight elongation of Jupiter's light. Most people throughout history had never suspected their existence. Even with his telescope, Galileo needed magnification of at least 20 times and a reasonably steady atmosphere to distinguish them clearly from the planet's glare. His careful observations revealed something else remarkable. The moons maintained their positions relative to Jupiter, even as the planet moved against the background stars. This demonstrated that they were gravitationally bound to Jupiter, participating in its motion through space. The universe was revealing itself to be more complex than a simple arrangement of objects all circling Earth. Instead, there were systems within systems, smaller cycles embedded within larger ones. By the end of January, Galileo had enough observations to be completely certain of his discovery. 4 moons orbited Jupiter with mathematical regularity. This was not an optical illusion, not a misinterpretation of background stars, but a genuine revelation about the structure of the solar system. The cosmos contained more worlds in motion than ancient astronomy had ever imagined. and the tools to see them had existed for less than 2 years. The discovery of Jupiter's moons represented more than just finding new celestial objects. It demonstrated that the telescope could reveal truths about the universe that were completely inaccessible to unaided human senses. The heavens contained secrets, and this instrument of curved glass could unveil them. What else might be waiting in the darkness, visible only to those who possessed the means to see? As January gave way to February, Galileo prepared to share his discoveries with the world, knowing they would transform humanity's understanding of the cosmos. As winter turned to spring in 1610, Galileo Galilei found himself in possession of knowledge that would change humanity's understanding of the cosmos forever. The careful observations he had made through his improved telescope over the previous months revealed a universe far more complex and wondrous than anyone had imagined. But discoveries written in private notebooks, no matter how revolutionary, could only transform the world if they were shared. And so, with a mixture of excitement and urgency, Galileo set about preparing a publication that would announce his findings to scholars across Europe. The small book he crafted was titled Sidereus Nuncius, which translates from Latin as the Starry Messenger, or Message from the Stars. In just 24 pages, this slender volume would shake the foundations of astronomy and natural philosophy. Galileo wrote with clarity and precision, describing his instrument, his methods, and most importantly, what he had seen through his telescope. He worked quickly, knowing that others might also be making observations with similar instruments, and he wished to establish his priority in these discoveries. The book was printed in Venice in March 1610 with an initial run of about 550 copies. By the standards of the time, this was a substantial first edition, and it spoke to Galileo's confidence that his findings would generate significant interest. He was not mistaken. Within days of publication, copies began circulating through Italian intellectual circles, and within weeks, Sidereus Nuncius had reached scholars throughout Europe. The response was immediate and intense. The opening sections of the book described observations that challenged ancient certainties. Galileo recounted what he had seen on the moon's surface, those mountains and valleys and craters that revealed our nearest celestial neighbor to be a world of terrain, not a perfect sphere of crystalline substance. He included careful drawings showing the changing appearance of the lunar surface as the terminator line moved across it with the moon's phases, providing visual evidence that readers could compare with their own observations if they possessed telescopes. But it was Galileo's account of Jupiter's moons that truly captured the imagination of Europe's learned community. He described the tiny points of light that wandered near the giant planet, appearing sometimes to its east, sometimes to its west, occasionally disappearing behind or in front of the planet itself. He presented tables of his nightly observations, showing the positions of these 4 satellites over time, allowing readers to see the pattern of their orbital dance. Here was incontrovertible evidence that not everything in the universe circled the Earth. At least 4 bodies clearly revolved around another planet, demonstrating that celestial motion was more complex than the simple Earth-centered model suggested. In his dedication, Galileo named these moons the Medicean stars, in honor of Cosimo II de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. This was more than mere flattery. It was a calculated move by a man who understood the practical realities of Renaissance patronage. Galileo hoped to secure a position at the Medici court in Florence, and attaching the family name to one of the century's great discoveries was a powerful gesture. The strategy worked. Within months, he would receive an appointment as chief mathematician and philosopher to the Grand Duke, allowing him to leave his teaching duties in Padua and devote himself more fully to research. Yet Sidereus Nuncius contained revelations beyond the Moon and Jupiter's satellites. Galileo described turning his telescope toward the stars themselves and finding that the heavens contained multitudes invisible to the naked eye. Where the unaided eye might see a handful of stars in a constellation, the telescope revealed dozens. Where darkness had seemed empty, faint stars appeared in uncountable numbers. The Milky Way, that luminous band across the night sky that had inspired myths and speculation for millennia, resolved through the telescope into countless individual stars, packed so densely that their light merged into a glowing river. This observation had profound implications. It suggested that the universe was far larger and more populated than anyone had previously thought. If so many stars remained invisible without optical aid, how many more might exist beyond even the telescope's reach? The cosmos, which had seemed a comprehensible sphere with Earth at its center, suddenly appeared vast and perhaps even infinite. In the months following the publication of Sidereus Nuncius, Galileo continued his observations and made additional discoveries that further challenged traditional astronomy. Later in 1610, he observed Venus carefully and noticed something extraordinary. The planet showed phases, like the Moon, sometimes appearing as a thin crescent, sometimes gibbous, sometimes nearly full. This observation was crucial because it could only be explained if Venus orbited the Sun, not the Earth. In the Earth-centered model, Venus should never appear fully illuminated from our perspective, but the phases Galileo observed matched perfectly with what would be expected if Venus circled the Sun, passing sometimes between Earth and Sun, and sometimes on the far side of the Sun from Earth. He also turned his telescope towards Saturn and observed something puzzling. The planet appeared to have peculiar appendages on either side, giving it an almost triple appearance. Galileo's telescope was not powerful enough to reveal these extensions as the rings we know them to be today. Instead, he described Saturn as having ears or handles. This mystery would perplex him for years, especially when the appendages seemed to disappear as Saturn's rings turned edge-on to Earth, making them invisible in the small telescopes of the era. The reception of Galileo's discoveries varied widely across Europe. Many astronomers and natural philosophers greeted the findings with enthusiasm, acquiring telescopes of their own and confirming what Galileo had reported. Johannes Kepler, the great German astronomer, wrote supportively of the observations despite never having seen through a telescope himself at that point. Others, however, approached the claims with skepticism. Some doubted whether the telescope showed real celestial phenomena or merely created optical illusions in its lenses. A few refused even to look through the instrument, preferring to trust ancient authorities rather than their own eyes aided by this new contraption. The discoveries announced in Sidereus Nuncius and the observations that followed represented more than just new facts about celestial objects. They demonstrated the power of instrumentation to extend human perception and revealed that the universe held wonders beyond what unaided senses could detect. The telescope had opened a new channel of knowledge, showing that our natural faculties, remarkable as they were, could be amplified and enhanced through clever application of optical principles. As copies of the starry messenger traveled from city to city, from university to court, they carried with them a new vision of the heavens, one populated with countless stars, where moons orbited giant planets, where our nearest neighbor showed mountains and valleys, and where the wandering stars revealed phases that hinted at the true arrangement of the solar system. The cosmos would never again seem quite so simple or so small as it had before Galileo ground his lenses and turned them skyward. The age of telescopic astronomy had truly begun. The news of Galileo's discoveries had spread across Europe like ripples across a still pond, carried by letters, conversations, and printed copies of his starry messenger. Telescopes, once novelties from the Netherlands, had become essential instruments for anyone wishing to explore the heavens. Yet, as more astronomers pointed these devices skyward and attempted to build more powerful instruments, they encountered frustrating limitations that would shape telescope design for generations to come. The fundamental challenge lay in the nature of refraction itself, the very principle that made these early telescopes possible. When light passes through a lens, it bends. But light is not a single or simple thing. It is composed of different colors, each bending at slightly different angles as it enters and exits the glass. This phenomenon, known as chromatic aberration, meant that a telescope's lens acted somewhat like a prism, spreading starlight into its component colors rather than bringing it all to a single, sharp focus. Observers peering through their telescopes noticed colorful halos surrounding bright objects, particularly troublesome when viewing the moon or planet. A bright star might appear ringed with blue and red fringes, while the edge of the moon could shimmer with unwanted rainbow edges. These colored artifacts obscured fine details and limited how much magnification could usefully be applied. Increasing the power simply made the colored distortions more pronounced, transforming what should have been crisp images into blurred, chromatic confusion. Early astronomers discovered that lenses with gentler curves produced less severe chromatic aberration. A lens that curves gradually, rather than steeply, bends light more slowly, and brings the different colors closer to a common focus. But here emerged another constraint. A lens with a gentle curve must have a much longer focal length. The focal length determines how far behind the lens the image forms, which means the entire telescope tube must be extended to that same length. And so began an era of increasingly extraordinary telescopes, instruments that stretched the very meaning of practicality. The astronomer, Johannes Hevelius, working from his observatory in Danzig during the mid-17th century, constructed refractors of astonishing dimensions. His instruments grew from 20 feet to 40 feet, then to 60, and eventually to lengths exceeding 150 feet. Imagine a telescope tube longer than many buildings were tall, pointing toward the night sky like some fantastic siege engine aimed at the stars themselves. Supporting such enormous tubes presented engineering challenges that tested the ingenuity of the age. A 100-foot tube of traditional construction would sag and bend under its own weight, misaligning the lenses and ruining any hope of useful observation. Some astronomers suspended their long telescopes from tall masts, using elaborate systems of ropes and pulleys, adjusting the aim by pulling various lines like sailors managing rigging. The slightest breeze could set the entire apparatus swaying, making steady observation nearly impossible. Hevelius and others experimented with open framework designs, abandoning the enclosed tube entirely. The objective lens would be mounted at the top of a tall pole or attached to a building, while the observer stood far below, holding the eyepiece and attempting to align it properly with the distant lens. These so-called aerial telescopes eliminated the weight of a long tube but introduced new difficulties. Keeping the two lenses precisely aligned across such distances required remarkable patience and often the assistance of several people working together. The Italian astronomer Giuseppe Campani constructed aerial telescopes approaching 200 feet in length, instruments so unwieldy that they could only be used on the calmest nights when atmospheric conditions permitted. Setting up for an evening's observation might require hours of preparation. Mounting the objective lens at the top of a specially constructed tower or tall building, then carefully positioning the eyepiece at ground level. A single observation session represented a significant undertaking, requiring clear skies, patient assistance, and no small measure of good fortune. Despite these considerable difficulties, astronomers persisted with their increasingly long refractors because the alternative was to accept the limitations of shorter instruments. The desire to see more, to push deeper into the cosmos, to reveal details invisible to smaller telescopes, drove them to embrace these cumbersome designs. Through these lengthy refractors, observers discovered details on planetary surfaces, additional moons orbiting Saturn and Jupiter, and the changing appearances of comets as they swept through the solar system. Christian Huygens, the Dutch mathematician and astronomer, built several long refractors in the latter half of the 17th century. With a telescope extending more than 100 feet, he observed Saturn with unprecedented clarity and correctly identified its famous rings, which earlier observers with smaller instruments had seen only as mysterious bulges or handles extending from the planet's sides. He also discovered Titan, Saturn's largest moon, a finding made possible by the improved clarity of his lengthy refractor. The French astronomer Giovanni Cassini, working at the Paris Observatory, employed aerial telescopes of remarkable dimensions to study Saturn's rings in even greater detail. He discovered a dark division separating the rings into distinct bands, a gap now known as the Cassini division in his honor. These observations required not only powerful telescopes, but also extraordinary patience, as aligning and focusing these aerial instruments demanded considerable skill and often multiple attempts before achieving useful views. Yet for all their discoveries, these extremely long refractors represented an evolutionary dead end. There were practical limits to how long a telescope could grow. An instrument extending 300 or 400 feet might theoretically provide even better images, but the challenges of construction, support, and operation became insurmountable. Weather, wind, and the simple mechanics of pointing such devices at specific celestial targets made them increasingly impractical. The atmosphere itself imposed additional limitations. Even on the clearest night, Earth's blanket of air shimmers and shifts, causing starlight to waver and dance. This atmospheric turbulence which creates the twinkling of stars that poets celebrate, frustrates astronomers seeking steady, detailed views. The longer the path that light must travel through the air, the more these distortions accumulate. Extremely long telescopes, with their shallow light paths approaching parallel to the ground for many observations, suffered particularly from atmospheric effects. As the 17th century progressed toward the 18th, it became increasingly clear that refractors had reached a practical limit. Chromatic aberration remained an unsolved problem, and the long focal lengths required to minimize it produced instruments that challenged the bounds of usability. Astronomers had pushed the refracting telescope as far as it could reasonably go. The next revolution in telescope design would require an entirely different approach, one that would abandon lenses altogether in favor of polished mirrors and reflected light. But in these decades of ever-lengthening tubes and aerial mountings, observers had learned valuable lessons about optics, atmospheric conditions, and the persistent human drive to see farther into the cosmic depths, regardless of the obstacles standing in the way. The long, unwieldy telescopes that astronomers had been building throughout the 17th century had begun to present problems that seemed almost insurmountable. These aerial telescopes, as they were called, stretched across courtyards and required elaborate systems of poles and ropes to aim them at the heavens. Some reached lengths that would seem absurd to modern eyes, extending well over 100 feet into the air, like great fishing rods pointing skyward. Yet for all their impressive reach, they remained plagued by the rainbow-colored halos that appeared around every bright object they captured. A persistent reminder that refracting light through glass came with inherent limitation. In Cambridge, England, during the 1660s, a young scholar named Isaac Newton had been thinking deeply about the nature of light itself. His experiments with prisms had revealed something fundamental about white light, that it was not pure at all, but rather a mixture of all colors, each bending at slightly different angles when passing through glass. This explained the chromatic aberration that frustrated astronomers. Different colors of light were focusing at different points, creating those troublesome colored fringes that no amount of lens grinding could fully eliminate. Newton understood that if lenses were the source of the problem, perhaps lenses were not the answer. In the quiet of his rooms, he began to consider an entirely different approach. Mirrors, he reasoned, would reflect all colors of light equally, bringing them to a common focus without separating them into their component hues. The concept was not entirely new. Several natural philosophers had proposed reflecting telescopes in theory, but the practical execution had eluded everyone who attempted it. In 1668, Newton set about constructing a working model of his vision. The instrument he created was remarkably compact compared to the towering refractors of his day, measuring just 6 inches in length. He cast and polished a curved mirror from speculum metal, an alloy of copper and tin that could be brought to a brilliant shine. This primary mirror sat at the base of a small tube, gathering incoming light and reflecting it back toward the opening. But Newton faced an immediate challenge. If the mirror reflected light back along the path it came, where would the observer position their eye without blocking the very light they wished to see? His elegant solution involved placing a small flat mirror at an angle near the top of the tube, tilting at 45 degrees to deflect the focused light out through a hole in the side of the instrument. There, an eyepiece lens allowed the observer to examine the magnified image. The design was ingenious in its simplicity, and this arrangement with the eyepiece positioned at the side of the tube, would become known as the Newtonian reflector, a design still used by amateur astronomers today. When Newton presented his creation to the Royal Society of London in early 1672, the response was one of considerable interest. Here was a telescope that could achieve magnifications comparable to much longer refractors, yet fit comfortably on a tabletop. The elimination of chromatic aberration meant that stars appeared as crisp points of light rather than coloured smudges. Fellow members of the Royal Society examined the device with curiosity, peering through its eyepiece and marvelling at the clarity of the images it produced. The practical advantages extended beyond mere optical quality. A compact reflecting telescope could be mounted more stably, pointed more easily, and required no elaborate support structures stretching across open spaces. The entire instrument could be housed indoors when not in use, protected from the elements. For observers in the damp English climate, this represented a significant improvement in convenience. Yet the reflecting telescope did not immediately sweep aside its refracting cousins. The speculum metal mirrors that Newton and his successors used tarnished relatively quickly, requiring frequent repolishing. The mirror-making process demanded considerable skill, and casting a perfect curve into metal presented its own technical challenges. Many astronomers remained loyal to their refractors, preferring instruments whose principles they understood well, even with their limitations. Still, Newton's demonstration had opened a new path forward. The reflecting telescope proved that different approaches to gathering and focusing light were possible, that the apparent limits of one technology need not constrain human ingenuity forever. In the decades that followed, other instrument makers began experimenting with variations on the reflecting design. Some placed the eyepiece at the end of the tube, using a secondary mirror to reflect light back through a hole in the primary mirror. Others tried different configurations, each attempting to optimize the balance between optical quality and practical usability. The true potential of reflecting telescopes would not be fully realized for many years, waiting for advances in mirror-making techniques and materials. But Newton's modest 6-inch instrument had proven the fundamental concept sound. Light could be gathered and focused by reflection as effectively as by refraction, and in some ways more effectively. The telescope need not be a simple tube with lenses at each end. It could be reimagined, redesigned, and improved in ways that early Dutch spectacle makers could never have envisioned. As Newton's reflecting telescope rested in the Royal Society's collection, it represented more than just an ingenious solution to a technical problem. It embodied a way of thinking about natural philosophy and instrument making that would characterize the scientific revolution then underway. When faced with a limitation, the response was not to accept defeat, but to question assumptions, to approach problems from entirely new angles, to ask whether the familiar way was truly the only way. The quiet instrument, with its metal mirror gleaming in its tube, held within it the seeds of future giant telescopes that would probe far deeper into space than anyone in that 17th century meeting hall could imagine. For now, it was enough that it worked, that it showed the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus with gratifying clarity, and that it suggested possibilities yet unexplored. The revolution in reflecting telescope design had begun, gentle and unhurried, like starlight itself traveling across the vast darkness to reach waiting eyes below. The late 18th century brought forth a man who would transform our view of the heavens through patient craftsmanship and tireless observation. William Herschel arrived in England from Hanover as a musician, a composer and organist who filled his days with melodies and harmonies. Yet his nights belonged to the stars. What began as a casual interest in astronomy gradually consumed him. And this musician discovered he possessed an unexpected gift for creating the very instruments that could reveal the cosmos in unprecedented detail. Herschel faced a simple problem. The finest telescopes of his era were expensive, well beyond the means of a music teacher. But rather than abandon his celestial pursuits, he decided to build his own. In the 1770s, he began teaching himself the demanding art of mirror making. Night after night, in the basement of his home in Bath, he ground and polished metal mirrors, seeking the perfect curve that would gather starlight and bring it to a sharp focus. His sister Caroline, who had joined him from Germany, often sat beside him during these long sessions, reading aloud to pass the hours as he worked the grinding tools in careful, repetitive motions. The process required extraordinary patience. A single mirror might demand 16 hours of continuous polishing, the metal held at precisely the right temperature, the pressure applied with unwavering consistency. Herschel could not pause, could not rest, for even a brief interruption might ruin weeks of work. Caroline would place morsels of food in his mouth as he worked, allowing him to maintain the steady rhythm his mirrors demanded. Many attempts ended in failure, the metal cracking or the surface developing imperfections. But with each attempt, Herschel learned, refined his technique, and gradually created mirrors of remarkable quality. By the late 1770s, Herschel was constructing reflecting telescopes that surpassed most professional instruments of the day. He built them in various sizes, experimenting with different focal lengths and mirror diameters. Unlike the astronomers who preceded him, content to observe well-known objects, Herschel embarked on something far more ambitious: a systematic survey of the entire visible sky. He would examine every part of the heavens accessible from his latitude, sweeping his telescope across the darkness in organized patterns, ensuring nothing escaped his attention. This methodical approach transformed a musical instructor into one of the most prolific discoverers in astronomical history. On the night of March the 13th, 1781, during one of his regular sweeps, Herschel noticed something unusual in the constellation Gemini. A small disk, distinctly different from the point-like stars surrounding it, caught his attention. Over subsequent nights, he tracked this object and realized it was moving against the background of fixed stars. Initially, he believed he had found a comet, and he reported it as such to the astronomical community. But as mathematicians calculated the object's orbit, an extraordinary truth emerged. This was no comet following an elongated path around the Sun. The object moved in a nearly circular orbit far beyond Saturn, the most distant planet known to ancient observers. Herschel had discovered a new world, the first planet to be identified in all of human history. The solar system, which had contained 6 planets since antiquity, suddenly expanded. The discovery sent ripples through scientific circles across Europe. Here was proof that even fundamental knowledge about our cosmic neighborhood remained incomplete, that the universe still held secrets waiting for patient observers with adequate instruments. The new planet eventually received the name Uranus, continuing the tradition of naming worlds after ancient deities. For Herschel, the discovery brought fame and patronage. King George III granted him a royal pension, allowing him to abandon music teaching and devote himself entirely to astronomy. He moved to Slough, near Windsor, where he could pursue his celestial surveys with royal support. With financial security came the opportunity to build even larger telescopes. Herschel understood that a bigger mirror could gather more light, revealing fainter objects and finer details. He constructed a telescope with a mirror 18 inches across, then one with a 24-inch mirror. But his ambition reached further still. In the 1780s, with royal funding, he began work on a massive 40-foot-long telescope with a mirror measuring 4 feet in diameter. This instrument represented an engineering challenge, unlike any previously attempted. The mirror alone weighed over 1,000 pounds, and the tube required an elaborate wooden framework to support it. The great telescope rose at Slough like a monument to human curiosity. Its tube pointed skyward from a complex mounting that allowed it to track objects across the night. Operating it required multiple assistants, and the observer stood on a platform that could be raised and lowered. Yet despite its impressive scale, this largest telescope proved less useful than Herschel's smaller instruments. The enormous mirror tarnished quickly in English air, and the mechanical challenges of aiming such a massive structure limited its practical application. Herschel conducted much of his most important work with his more manageable reflectors. What made Herschel truly remarkable was not just his discoveries, but his systematic approach to cataloguing the heavens. While others focused on specific objects, he methodically recorded everything he saw. He catalogued over 2,000 nebulae and star clusters, vastly expanding the known census of deep sky objects. Many appeared as faint, fuzzy patches, their true nature unclear to observers of his era. Some were genuine clouds of gas and dust, stellar nurseries where new suns were forming. Others, though Herschel could not know this, were distant galaxies, island universes of billions of stars lying far beyond the boundaries of our own Milky Way. Caroline Herschel proved far more than her brother's assistant. She became an accomplished astronomer in her own right, discovering several comets and creating detailed catalogues that organized their observations. On clear nights, while William worked at one telescope, Caroline often operated another, both of them harvesting the sky's treasures. Their collaboration demonstrated how astronomy could welcome dedicated observers, regardless of formal credentials, rewarding patience and careful attention. Herschel also pondered the fundamental structure of the heavens. By counting stars in different directions, he attempted to map the shape of the Milky Way itself. He proposed that our sun resided within a vast disk of stars, a flattened system stretching across space. Though his specific measurements would later prove incorrect, his insight that the Milky Way possessed a definite structure, and that this structure could be investigated through systematic observation, pointed toward the science of galactic astronomy that would flourish in later centuries. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, William Herschel's work stood as a testament to what careful craftsmanship and persistent observation could achieve. He had expanded the solar system, catalogued thousands of previously unknown objects, and demonstrated that larger telescopes could unlock cosmic secrets invisible to smaller instruments. The musician from Hanover, through countless nights of grinding mirrors and sweeping the sky, had shown that the universe revealed its wonders to those patient enough to look carefully and systematically at the darkness between the stars. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, astronomers found themselves in possession of increasingly powerful telescopes, yet faced with a puzzling question. What exactly were they looking at? The night sky revealed far more than the ancients had ever imagined. Beyond the familiar points of light that were stars, beyond the wandering planets that had been known since antiquity, there existed mysterious fuzzy patches and diffuse glows that seemed to occupy a category all their own. These objects presented a particular problem for one French astronomer. Charles Messier was a comet hunter, dedicating his nights to sweeping the sky in search of these celestial visitors that would suddenly appear, grow bright, and then fade away. Comets were fascinating objects in their own right, and discovering one could bring an astronomer considerable fame. But Messier kept encountering frustrating false alarms. Time and again, he would spot a faint, fuzzy patch through his telescope, his heart quickening at the possibility of a new comet, only to observe it over several nights and realize with disappointment that it wasn't moving at all. These were permanent residents of the sky, fixed in place like the stars themselves, yet entirely different in appearance. Rather than continuing to waste time on these imposters, Messier decided to create a list. Starting in the 1760s, he began systematically cataloguing every fuzzy, cloud-like object he encountered, noting its position with careful precision. His intention was entirely practical: create a reference guide of things that were definitely not comets, so that he and other comet hunters wouldn't be fooled by them. The irony would become apparent in time. While most of the comets Messier discovered are now remembered only by specialists, his catalogue of objects to ignore became one of the most famous astronomical references ever created. Messier's list grew steadily over the years. Each entry received a simple designation: M1, M2, M3, and so on. The first entry, M1, was a peculiar wispy structure in the constellation Taurus that later astronomers would call the Crab Nebula. M31 was a large oval glow in Andromeda that had been known since ancient times. M42 marked the beautiful cloud in Orion's sword, visible even to the naked eye under dark skies. By the time Messier published his final catalogue in 1781, it contained over 100 objects, a collection of the sky's most intriguing mysteries. What Messier couldn't know, working with the telescopes available to him, was that his catalogue actually contained wildly different types of objects. Some were clouds of glowing gas within our own galaxy, stellar nurseries where new stars were forming. Others were globular clusters, dense balls containing hundreds of thousands of ancient stars. Still others were entirely separate galaxies, island universes millions of light years away. All appeared as fuzzy patches through his telescope, but they represented fundamentally different phenomena scattered across vastly different distances. Other astronomers contributed to this growing inventory of the deep sky. William Herschel, aided by his sister Caroline, discovered and catalogued thousands of nebulae and star clusters during their systematic surveys. Their lists were far more extensive than Messier's, documenting what seemed to be an inexhaustible variety of cloudy objects scattered throughout the heavens. Some nebulae appeared round and planetary-like, others stretched into irregular shapes. Some could be resolved into individual stars when viewed through large enough telescopes, while others remained stubbornly diffuse no matter how much magnification was applied. As the 19th century progressed, astronomers recognized the need for even more comprehensive catalogues. John Herschel, William's son, continued his father's work, observing nebulae from both the northern and southern hemispheres. The accumulation of observations from multiple astronomers using different telescopes created confusion, however, as the same object might be listed multiple times under different designations or described with slightly different positions. In the 1880s, John Louis Emile Dreyer compiled these various lists into a unified reference work called the New General Catalogue of Nebulae and Clusters of Stars. Published in 1888, this catalogue brought order to the chaos, listing nearly 8,000 objects with standardized positions and descriptions. Dreyer later supplemented this with 2 index catalogues, adding thousands more. The NGC designations from this work remain in use today. NGC 224 is another name for M31, the Andromeda Galaxy. NGC 7293 designates the Helix Nebula, one of the nearest planetary nebulae to Earth. These catalogues served multiple purposes beyond simple bookkeeping. They represented a fundamental shift in how astronomers approach the sky. Rather than focusing solely on the movements of planets or the positions of stars, observers were now systematically mapping the universe's structure. Each catalogue entry was a question waiting for an answer. What were these objects made of? How far away were they? How had they formed? The work of cataloguing was methodical and sometimes tedious, requiring patience and attention to detail. An astronomer would point the telescope to a specific region of sky, carefully scan for any fuzzy patches, note their positions relative to nearby stars, estimate their brightness and size, and describe their appearance. A globular cluster might be noted as round, very compressed, very rich in stars. A nebula might be described as very faint, considerably large, irregular. These descriptive phrases were attempts to capture in words what the eye saw through the eyepiece on a particular night, under particular atmospheric conditions. The creation of these catalogues also revealed patterns. Certain regions of the sky were rich in nebulae, while others contained few. Many objects clustered along the band of the Milky Way, while others appeared far from this concentration of stars. Some nebulae seemed associated with particular stars, while others existed in apparently empty regions of space. Each pattern was a clue, though understanding what these clues meant would require decades of additional work. Photography would eventually transform the process of cataloguing the sky, allowing permanent records that could be studied at leisure rather than fleeting observations made during cold nights at the telescope. But in these earlier decades, the work depended entirely on the skill of the observer, the quality of the telescope, and the steadiness of the atmosphere. Two astronomers might describe the same nebula quite differently based on the equipment they used and the conditions under which they observed. Through this patient, systematic work, astronomers were creating a census of the deep sky, documenting a universe far more complex and varied than earlier generations had imagined. The catalogues themselves were achievements of quiet dedication, each entry representing time spent under the night sky, eye pressed to eyepiece, carefully recording what the telescope revealed. These lists of fuzzy patches and stellar clusters would become roadmaps for future generations, guides to the vast territories that lay beyond the realm of naked eye astronomy, waiting to yield their secrets. In the rolling green hills of Central Ireland, far from the great observatories of continental Europe, an ambitious vision was taking shape. The year was 1842, and William Parsons, the third Earl of Ross, had begun work on a telescope that would dwarf anything humanity had yet constructed. On his estate at Birr Castle in County Offaly, Lord Ross envisioned an instrument with a mirror 6 feet across, a size that seemed almost fantastical to astronomers of the time. The challenges facing Lord Ross were immense. Creating a mirror of such unprecedented dimensions required innovations in every aspect of construction. The mirror itself would be fashioned from speculum metal, an alloy of copper and tin that could be polished to brilliant reflectivity. But casting such a massive piece of metal without flaws, bubbles or imperfections demanded techniques no one had yet perfected. Lord Ross approached these challenges with patience and methodical determination. In workshops on his estate, he supervised the construction of specialized furnaces and casting equipment. The first attempts produced mirrors with tiny imperfections that would scatter light and blur images. Each failure taught lessons about temperature control, the exact proportions of metals in the alloy, and the cooling process that could make or break the final product. The work progressed slowly through the early 1840s. Lord Ross and his team developed massive machinery for grinding and polishing the mirror's surface. The metal blank, weighing several tons, required weeks of careful work to shape its concave curve precisely. Workers guided the grinding process by hand, checking and rechecking the mirror's shape against mathematical calculations. The surface had to be perfect, curved to exactly the right depth, smooth to within fractions of a hair's width. While the mirror took shape, equally impressive engineering went into the telescope's mounting. A mirror 72 inches across needed support structures of corresponding scale. Lord Ross designed massive stone walls, standing over 50 feet high, between which the telescope tube would be suspended. These walls, built from local limestone, were positioned to allow the telescope to track objects as they moved across the southern sky. The tube itself, constructed of iron and wood, stretched nearly 60 feet in length. By 1845, the components were ready for assembly. The polished mirror was carefully installed at the base of the tube, its gleaming surface ready to gather light from the depths of space. The completed instrument earned an immediate nickname that captured its imposing nature: the Leviathan of Parsonstown. It was, without question, the largest telescope in the world, and it would hold that distinction for more than 70 years. The first observations through the Leviathan revealed the instrument's remarkable power. Objects that appeared as faint smudges in smaller telescopes resolved into detailed structures. Lord Ross turned his attention to those mysterious nebulae that had been catalogued by earlier observers. the cloudy patches of light whose true nature remained unknown. What he saw through his massive telescope would hint at cosmic truths not fully understood for decades to come. In April 1845, Lord Rosse observed a nebula catalogued as Messier 51. Through the enormous light-gathering power of his 6-foot mirror, he saw something no one had clearly seen before, a distinct spiral structure, like a cosmic whirlpool frozen in the sky. He carefully sketched what he observed, capturing the elegant curve of spiral arms extending from a bright central region. Here was clear evidence that at least some nebulae possessed organized, complex structures. Over the following years, Lord Rosse identified spiral patterns in other nebulae as well. He observed and drew Messier 99, Messier 63, and others, each showing those distinctive curved arms. These observations raised profound questions. Were these spiral nebulae clouds of gas within our own stellar system? Or could they be something else entirely? The Leviathan could show their structure, but could not yet determine their distance or true nature. The telescope also revealed remarkable details in other celestial objects. The Orion Nebula displayed intricate structure, with filaments and condensations of luminous material. Star clusters resolved into countless individual points of light. Planetary nebulae showed delicate shells and rings of glowing gas surrounding their central stars. Each clear night brought new wonders into view, Yet operating the Leviathan presented constant challenges. The massive instrument was difficult to point and could only observe objects in a limited strip of sky between its stone supporting walls. The speculum metal mirrors tarnished relatively quickly in Ireland's damp climate, requiring frequent repolishing. Cloudy weather often obscured the skies, and the telescope had no clock drive mechanism, so objects would drift through the field of view as Earth rotated, limiting observation time for any single target. Lord Rosse's observations were painstaking work, requiring patience and careful attention. He would position the telescope, wait for his eyes to adapt to darkness, and then study the faint light gathered by his giant mirror. He sketched what he saw, trying to capture ephemeral details at the edge of visibility. His drawings would be refined and compared with observations on subsequent nights, building up a detailed record of each object's appearance. The discoveries made with the Leviathan contributed to astronomy during a pivotal era. The spiral structures Lord Rosse documented would later prove crucial in understanding the nature of galaxies beyond our Milky Way. His detailed observations of nebulae added to the growing catalogue of objects that demanded explanation. How did these structures form? What processes shaped their appearance? The telescope raised questions that would occupy astronomers for generations. As decades passed, the Leviathan remained an impressive achievement, though newer telescopes with better mountings and eventually glass mirrors would surpass its capabilities. The Great Telescope at Birr Castle represented a peak in what could be accomplished through private funding and individual vision. One person, with sufficient resources and determination, had pushed telescope construction to scales that seemed impossible, creating an instrument that opened new windows on the cosmos. On quiet Irish nights, when clouds parted and stars emerged, the massive tube still pointed skyward, its 6-foot mirror gathering ancient light. The Leviathan stood as testament to human curiosity, to the drive to see further and understand more deeply. In those spiraling nebulae, glimpsed through Lord Ross's patient efforts, lay hints of a universe far grander than anyone yet imagined. Island universes spinning through the vast dark, waiting for future generations to comprehend their true nature and distance. The massive telescope at Parsonstown had revealed spirals in the nebulae, structures too faint and delicate for the human eye to fully appreciate even when looking directly through the eyepiece. Artists could sketch what they glimpsed during moments of perfect atmospheric steadiness, but these drawings relied on memory, interpretation, and the limits of human perception. What astronomers needed was a way to capture the light itself, to accumulate the faint photons arriving from distant objects over long periods, building up an image that no eye could ever see in a single glance. The solution would come from an entirely different field of human endeavor, one that had recently begun to transform how people recorded the world around them. Photography emerged in the 1830s and 1840s through the work of several inventors working independently. Louis Daguerre in France created images on silver-plated copper sheets, while William Henry Fox Talbot in England developed a negative-positive process using paper. These early photographs required long exposures, even for sunlit scenes, but they captured reality with unprecedented accuracy. Within years, photographers were documenting cities, landscapes, and people with a precision that painting could never match. Some astronomers immediately recognized the potential. The moon and sun were bright enough to photograph with exposures of mere seconds or minutes. In 1840, John William Draper, a chemist and physician working in New York, successfully captured a daguerreotype image of the moon. The image was small and crude by later standards, but it represented something revolutionary. For the first time, light that had traveled from another world was chemically recorded, creating a permanent image that could be studied at leisure, measured precisely, and shared with others without relying on artistic interpretation. The sun proved an even more valuable photographic subject. During solar eclipses, astronomers could photograph the corona, that mysterious pearly glow visible around the darkened disk. These photographs revealed structures extending far from the solar surface, details that appeared and disappeared too quickly during the precious minutes of totality for observers to sketch accurately. The photographic plate, patient and faithful, recorded everything the telescope gathered. But the real promise of astronomical photography lay with fainter objects. The human eye, remarkable as it is, cannot accumulate light. Whether you look at a faint star for 1 second or 1 hour, it appears the same brightness. The retina responds to light as it arrives, then resets. A photographic emulsion works differently. Silver salts suspended in gelatin undergo chemical changes when struck by light, and these changes accumulate. The longer the exposure, the more light is captured, and the more of these tiny chemical transformations occur across the plate. This meant that a camera attached to a telescope could, in theory, reveal objects completely invisible to an astronomer looking through that same telescope. All it required was time, patience, and very careful engineering. The telescope had to track the stars perfectly as Earth rotated, keeping the image motionless on the photographic plate for minutes or even hours. Any wobble, any drift, would blur the image into uselessness. In the 1880s, astronomical photography began to mature into a practical technique. Improved photographic emulsions became more sensitive to light. Clockwork mechanisms could turn telescopes smoothly enough to track the stars during long exposures. Astronomers developed methods to guide their instruments, watching a reference star through a separate eyepiece and making tiny corrections to keep everything precisely aligned. One of the early masters of this new art was Henry Draper, son of John William Draper, who had photographed the moon 4 decades earlier. Working from his private observatory in New York, Henry Draper photographed the spectrum of stars, spreading their light into rainbows and recording the patterns of dark and bright lines. In 1880, he captured the first photograph of the Orion Nebula, that cloudy region visible even to the naked eye in winter skies. The photograph revealed intricate structures in the glowing gas, details that had challenged even the best visual observers. When Henry Draper passed away unexpectedly in 1882, his widow Anna honored his memory by funding continued astronomical photography at Harvard College Observatory. Over the following decades, this program would produce hundreds of thousands of photographic plates, creating an archive of the sky that astronomers still consult today. The advantages of photography multiplied as astronomers learned to exploit them. Photographic plates created permanent records that could be examined repeatedly, measured with precision, and compared with images taken months or years apart. An observer sketching at the telescope might miss a faint detail, or might unconsciously allow expectations to influence what they drew. The photograph showed everything, indifferent and objective. This objectivity proved particularly valuable for discovering changes in the sky. An astronomer could place a new photograph next to an older one of the same region, and, using a device called a blink comparator, rapidly switch between the two views. Anything that had moved or changed brightness would seem to jump or flicker, immediately drawing attention. This technique led to discoveries of asteroids, variable stars, and eventually distant planets that moved too slowly against the background stars for anyone to notice in real time. Stellar positions could be measured on photographic plates with extraordinary precision. As telescopes tracked across the sky during long exposures, they recorded star positions relative to one another. By measuring these positions on multiple plates taken over months or years, astronomers could detect the tiny proper motions of nearby stars as they drifted through space, or the even tinier parallax shifts caused by Earth's motion around the Sun. Photography also democratized certain aspects of astronomy. Once a photograph was taken, copies could be made and distributed to researchers around the world. Astronomers no longer needed access to the largest telescopes to study faint objects. They could work from photographic plates in comfortable laboratories, taking careful measurements without spending cold nights at the eyepiece. The plates could be studied during daylight hours, examined with measuring instruments, and analyzed mathematically. Yet the technique presented challenges. Photographic emulsions of the era were most sensitive to blue and ultraviolet light, less responsive to the red and yellow wavelengths that human eyes perceive well. This meant photographs and visual observations sometimes showed different aspects of the same object. Stars that appeared bright to the eye might look faint on a plate if most of their light was reddish. Nebulae glowing with red hydrogen light barely registered on early photographic materials. The process required patience and meticulous attention to detail. Plates had to be loaded in complete darkness. The telescope had to be guided precisely throughout the exposure, and development of the plates demanded careful chemical work. A single mistake could waste hours of observing time on a precious clear night. But for those willing to master the craft, photography opened the universe in ways previously unimaginable. As the 19th century drew toward its close, major observatories were establishing photographic programs, systematically recording the positions and brightnesses of stars across the entire sky. The Carte du Ciel project, initiated in 1887, aimed to create a complete photographic map of the heavens through international cooperation. Though the project would never fully achieve its ambitious goals, it demonstrated how photography was transforming astronomy from an observational art into an archival science, building libraries of data that future generations could mine for discoveries yet unimagined. As photography began to capture the faintest whispers of light from the cosmos, a parallel revolution was unfolding in the workshops of master opticians. The latter half of the 19th century witnessed the flowering of an extraordinary achievement in telescope design: the Great Refracting Telescopes, instruments of such precision and magnificence that they would come to define an entire era of astronomical discovery. The refractor, that elegant arrangement of lenses mounted in a long tube, had always possessed a certain appeal. Unlike mirrors, which required frequent polishing and adjustment, glass lenses maintained their figure indefinitely. The view through a well-made refractor was crisp and sharp, with none of the slight light loss inherent in reflection. Yet for decades, the dream of building truly large refractors remained just that, a dream hindered by the stubborn problem of chromatic aberration and the extraordinary difficulty of casting perfect glass discs of substantial size. The breakthrough came through the collaboration of optical theorists and master glassmakers. In the early 1800s, Joseph von Fraunhofer had demonstrated that by carefully combining two types of glass, crown glass and flint glass, each with different properties of light dispersion, the rainbow of false colors could be largely corrected. This achromatic design allowed different wavelengths of light to come to focus at nearly the same point, producing images of remarkable clarity. But creating such lenses in truly large sizes would test the limits of both materials and craftsmanship. The challenge of casting large glass blanks was immense. Glass had to be melted, stirred to perfect homogeneity, and cooled with excruciating slowness over weeks or even months. The slightest irregularity, the merest bubble or strain in the material, would render the disc useless for precision optics. Many attempts ended in heartbreak, as enormous glass blanks cracked during cooling or revealed fatal flaws during grinding. Yet gradually, certain glassworks developed the expertise to produce ever larger blanks of suitable quality. The firm of Chance Brothers in England, and later the glassworks in France, became legendary for their telescope objectives. Meanwhile, master opticians like Alvan Clark in America developed grinding and polishing techniques of extraordinary refinement. Working with his sons, Alvan Graham Clark and George Bassett Clark, the elder Clark established a workshop in Massachusetts that would produce some of the finest lenses ever made. The Clarks approached their work with patience that bordered on meditation, grinding a large lens blank into the precise curve required, accurate to within a fraction of a wavelength of light, might take a year or more of careful work. The glass disc would be mounted on a grinding machine, pressed against tools of progressively finer grit, then polished to transparency with rouge powder until it achieved a surface of almost molecular smoothness. Testing the optical quality required elaborate apparatus and exacting standards. A lens destined for a major observatory had to be perfect. In 1888, the Lick Observatory opened on Mount Hamilton in California with a 36-inch refractor. At that time, the largest in the world. The telescope was a gift of James Lick, a California businessman who had made his fortune in real estate and who wished to create something that would outlast his name. The objective lens, crafted by the Clarks, took years to complete. When finally installed in the elegant dome atop Mount Hamilton, the telescope revealed views of unprecedented clarity and detail. Astronomers using the Lick refractor made discoveries that rippled through the scientific world. Edward Emerson Barnard, spending long nights at the eyepiece, discovered Amalthea, the fifth moon of Jupiter, in 1892, the first new satellite of that planet found since Galileo's original fall. He also observed and photographed dark nebulae, mysterious patches that seemed to blot out the star fields behind them, adding to the growing catalogue of cosmic wonders. But even as the Lick telescope was beginning its work, plans were already underway for an even larger instrument. George Ellery Hale, a young and ambitious astronomer, dreamed of a telescope that would surpass all others. Through a combination of scientific vision and skillful fundraising, he secured support from Chicago businessman Charles Yerkes to construct a 40-inch refractor. The creation of the Yerkes objective was an achievement that pushed glass and lens making to their absolute limit. The two glass blanks, one crown glass, one flint glass, which would be mounted together to form the achromatic pair, came from France after years of effort. The Clarks once again undertook the grinding and polishing, knowing that this would likely represent the pinnacle of their art. A lens any larger would sag under its own weight, distorting the very precision they worked so hard to achieve. The Yerkes Observatory opened in 1897 in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, housing the Great Telescope in a dome that still stands as a monument to the refracting telescope's golden age. The telescope tube stretched more than 60 feet in length, mounted on a precision mechanism that could track the star's apparent motion across the sky with exquisite accuracy. At the eyepiece of this magnificent instrument, astronomers found themselves transported to worlds of astonishing detail. Through the Yerkes refractor, planetary surfaces revealed features that had been mere hints in smaller telescopes. Mars showed networks of subtle markings that sparked intense debate about their nature. Jupiter's cloud bands displayed intricate structure and turbulent motion. Saturn's rings exhibited divisions and variations in brightness that suggested complex organization. The steady, sharp images provided by the large refractor made it possible to measure and map these features with unprecedented precision. The Great Refractors also proved invaluable for a less dramatic but equally important task, measuring the positions of stars with extraordinary accuracy. This work of astrometry, as it was called, allowed astronomers to detect the tiny wobbles or shifts that might indicate an unseen companion star, or to measure stellar distances through parallax. The long focal length of these telescopes and their stable, crisp images made them ideal for this painstaking work. Yet even as these magnificent instruments achieved their greatest triumphs, astronomers recognized that the refractor had reached a natural limit. The Yerkes 40-inch would never be surpassed. Glass lenses of larger size would sag and distort, and the telescope tubes needed to support them would become impractically long. The future of truly giant telescopes lay with reflectors, with mirrors instead of lenses gathering starlight. Still, the Great Refractors represented something beyond their technical specifications. They embodied a marriage of art and science, the culmination of centuries of optical knowledge and craftsmanship. The quiet rooms where master opticians ground and polished glass for months on end, testing and retesting until perfection was achieved, held a meditative quality that seemed fitting for instruments designed to contemplate the heavens. On clear nights, when the dome shutters rolled open and the Great Refractor turned its gaze skyward, observers entering the darkened observatory space encountered something almost cathedral-like. The massive telescope, balanced so perfectly that it could be moved with a gentle touch. The eyepiece offering a window to depths of space beyond everyday comprehension. These created an experience that remained with astronomers throughout their lives. The era of the Great Refractors had shown what could be achieved through dedication to precision and clarity. As the 19th century drew to a close and a new century dawned, the discoveries made through these elegant instruments had revealed a universe of far greater complexity and wonder than earlier generations had imagined. The stage was now set for new questions, new tools, and new ways of reading the story written in starlight. As magnificent as the Great Refractors had become by the closing decades of the 19th century, with their enormous lenses gathering light from distant worlds, astronomers had begun to understand that simply seeing celestial objects more clearly was only part of the story. The universe held secrets that could not be revealed by magnification alone. What was needed was a way to understand the very nature of the light itself, to decode the messages carried across vast distances by the starlight that had traveled for years, centuries, or even millennia to reach Earth's surface. The key to unlocking these secrets lay in an instrument that had been developed decades earlier in laboratories far from any observatory. When a beam of light passed through a triangular glass prism, it spread into a rainbow of colors, a spectrum ranging from deep red through orange, yellow, green, and blue to violet. This phenomenon had fascinated natural philosophers since Newton's time, but in the early 19th century, a German optician named Joseph von Fraunhofer made a remarkable discovery while studying sunlight dispersed through his precision prisms. Fraunhofer noticed that the sun's spectrum was not a smooth, continuous rainbow. Instead, it was crossed by hundreds of dark lines at specific wavelengths, as if someone had drawn fine black threads across the colors. He carefully mapped these lines, labeling the most prominent ones with letters that astronomers still use today. Yet Fraunhofer could not explain what these mysterious lines meant or why they appeared in such precise locations. The answer came in the 1850s, when two German scientists, Robert Bunsen and Gustav Kirchhoff, conducted careful experiments in their laboratory at Heidelberg. They discovered that when chemical elements were heated until they glowed, each element produced its own unique pattern of bright lines at specific wavelengths. Sodium always produced two bright yellow lines close together. Hydrogen created a series of lines, including a prominent red one. Iron generated a complex forest of lines scattered across the spectrum. Most remarkably, when they passed light from a continuous source through a cooler gas containing these same elements, dark lines appeared at exactly the same wavelengths where the bright lines had been. The cooler gas absorbed light at the precise wavelengths it would emit when heated. This meant that Fraunhofer's dark lines in the solar spectrum were telling astronomers which elements existed in the Sun's outer atmosphere, absorbing specific wavelengths from the bright, continuous spectrum generated in the solar interior. This realization transformed astronomy overnight. For the first time in human history, it became possible to determine the chemical composition of objects millions or billions of miles away. The stars were no longer unreachable points of light, but could be analyzed with the same rigor as substances in an earthly laboratory. Astronomers quickly began attaching spectroscopes to their telescopes, devices that used prisms or later diffraction gratings to spread starlight into spectra. William Huggins, working from his private observatory in London in the 1860s, became one of the pioneers of this new stellar spectroscopy. He discovered that stars showed the same dark absorption lines as the Sun, revealing that distant suns contained familiar elements like hydrogen, sodium, calcium, and iron. The stars, it turned out, were made of the same substances found on Earth. Huggins also made another profound discovery when he turned his spectroscope toward the nebulae that appeared as fuzzy patches through conventional telescopes. Some nebulae showed continuous spectra with dark absorption lines, suggesting they were collections of countless distant stars. But others showed only bright emission lines at specific wavelengths, proving they were clouds of glowing gas, not distant stellar systems. This distinction would prove crucial in later debates about the nature of spiral nebulae and the scale of the universe. The spectroscope revealed more than just chemical composition. In 1868, astronomers observing a solar eclipse noticed a bright yellow line in the spectrum of the Sun's outer atmosphere that matched no known element on Earth. They proposed the existence of a new element, which they named helium after Helios, the Greek sun god. Not until nearly 3 decades later was helium discovered on Earth, isolated from uranium ore. The spectroscope had found an element in the heavens before it was known to exist on our own planet. As astronomers gained experience reading stellar spectra, they noticed that stars showed different patterns of spectral lines. Some showed strong hydrogen lines. Others showed prominent lines of metals like iron and calcium, while still others showed molecular bands suggesting cooler temperatures. In the 1890s, astronomers at Harvard College Observatory, particularly Edward Pickering and his team of skilled women computers, developed a classification system organizing stars by their spectral characteristics. One of these women, Annie Jump Cannon, refined the classification into the sequence still used today: O, B, A, F, G, K, and M, progressing from the hottest blue-white stars to the coolest red ones. Over her career, she personally classified hundreds of thousands of stars, creating an invaluable resource for understanding stellar properties. Her colleague Williamina Fleming discovered the white dwarf companion of a bright star by its unusual spectrum, while Antonia Mori recognized that spectral lines appeared different widths in different stars, a clue to understanding stellar atmospheres. The spectroscope also allowed astronomers to measure stellar motion with unprecedented precision through the Doppler effect. when a star moved toward Earth. Its spectral lines shifted slightly toward the blue end of the spectrum, wavelengths compressed by the approaching motion. When a star moved away, its lines shifted toward the red, wavelengths stretched by recession. By measuring these tiny shifts, astronomers could determine how fast stars were moving along the line of sight, even when the motion was far too slow to detect by watching the star's position change. This capability revealed that stars orbited through the galaxy at tremendous speeds, that binary stars whirled around each other, and that some stars pulsated in size, their surfaces alternately approaching and receding. The spectroscope transformed stars from static points of light into dynamic objects with measurable physical properties and motions. As the 19th century drew to a close, the marriage of the telescope and the spectroscope had fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with the stars. No longer were celestial objects merely beautiful lights to observe and catalogue. They had become physical objects that could be analysed, measured, and understood through the same scientific principles that governed earthly matter. The spectroscope had proven that the universe operated according to universal physical laws, that the same elements and forces present on Earth existed in the farthest reaches of space. The gentle glow of starlight, traveling across the vast darkness of space, carried within it an encyclopedia of information waiting to be read by those who knew how to decode its message. As observatories prepared to enter a new century, the spectroscope would remain an essential tool, ready to reveal even deeper secrets hidden in the light of distant suns, nebulae, and eventually galaxies beyond imagination. The universe had begun to tell its story, written in lines of light across the spectrum. As the 19th century drew to a close and the 20th began, astronomers faced a growing challenge that no amount of optical refinement could solve. The very air they looked through, the Earth's own atmosphere, imposed fundamental limits on what even the finest telescopes could reveal. Stars twinkled beautifully to the casual observer, but that same twinkling represented turbulent air, blurring and distorting the images astronomers desperately wanted to study. The solution, though logistically daunting, seemed obvious. Build observatories where the air itself was clearer, steadier, and thinner. The concept wasn't entirely new. Astronomers had long noticed that observations made from higher elevations seemed sharper, the stars less affected by atmospheric shimmer. But the great observatories of the 19th century had been built near cities, near universities, near the centers of learning and civilization, where astronomers lived and worked. The idea of hauling tons of precision equipment up remote mountainsides, then somehow maintaining and operating these delicate instruments in isolated, harsh conditions, seemed almost absurd. Yet as the new century dawned, the potential rewards outweighed the considerable difficulties. Southern California, with its dry climate and numerous mountain ranges, became an unexpected center of this astronomical migration upward. George Ellery Hale, a visionary astronomer with an extraordinary talent for raising funds and inspiring donors, championed the establishment of Mount Wilson Observatory in the San Gabriel Mountains northeast of Los Angeles. The site, at an elevation of 5,700 feet, offered remarkably steady air and clear skies far from city lights. Getting there, however, required either a long horseback ride or an arduous hike up steep, winding trails through chaparral and pine forest. The construction challenges were formidable. Every piece of equipment, every section of telescope tube, every tool and building material had to be transported up that mountain. Workers carved roads, built facilities, and somehow managed to deliver massive telescope components to the summit. The 60-inch reflector telescope, completed there in 1908, required bringing up a mirror, blank weighing nearly a ton, along with the intricate mounting mechanism and the dome to house it all. Engineers and workers labored in thin air, dealing with temperature extremes, powerful winds, and the simple exhaustion of working at altitude. Yet the results justified every difficulty. From Mount Wilson, astronomers could observe with a clarity impossible at sea level. Stars appeared as sharp points rather than dancing blurs. Fine details on planetary surfaces emerged with unprecedented definition. The steady air allowed longer photographic exposures that could capture ever fainter objects, revealing a universe more populated with distant stars and nebulae than previous instruments had suggested. Other mountain observatories followed similar patterns of development. Lick Observatory, established earlier on Mount Hamilton, east of San Jose, California, had pioneered the concept of the isolated mountaintop facility. At an elevation of 4,200 feet, it too required extensive construction efforts to transport the components of its 36-inch refractor up winding roads carved from the mountainside. The dedication ceremony in 1888 attracted hundreds of visitors who made the long journey to witness this temple of science perched above the world. The practical realities of mountain astronomy created unique challenges for the astronomers themselves. Unlike their 19th century predecessors, who might walk from university offices to nearby observatory domes, these 20th century observers had to journey to remote locations and work long nights in cold, isolated conditions. They lived in Spartan quarters on the mountain, separated from families and colleagues, enduring temperature swings and the physical demands of high-altitude work. Observing through the night at a mountaintop observatory meant sitting in an unheated dome as temperatures plummeted, making careful adjustments to telescopes while fighting fatigue and cold. The observing process itself demanded patience and skill. Photographers prepared glass plates coated with light-sensitive emulsions, working in darkrooms built into the observatory facilities. These plates had to be loaded into holders, attached to the telescope, then exposed for hours, while the astronomer carefully guided the instrument to compensate for Earth's rotation. A single mistake, a moment's inattention, could ruin an entire night's work. Yet when successful, these long exposures revealed wonders. Star clusters resolved into thousands of individual points, nebulae showing delicate structure, and galaxies appearing as faint smudges at the very limits of detection. The international astronomical community soon recognized the advantages of high-altitude observing. European observatories established facilities in the Alps and Pyrenees. The clear, dry air above the Atacama Desert in Chile attracted attention, though the extreme remoteness of such locations initially limited development there. Each site selection involved careful study of local atmospheric conditions, accessibility, and weather patterns. Astronomers wanted locations where clouds rarely obscured the sky, where air currents flowed smoothly rather than turbulently, and where the atmosphere above was as transparent as possible to starlight. Support facilities grew around these mountaintop installations, machine shops for maintaining equipment, libraries for research, dark rooms for processing, photographic plates, and living quarters for staff all had to be constructed and supplied. Regular shipments brought food, water, fuel, and supplies up the mountain. Telephone lines connected observers to the outside world, allowing them to coordinate with colleagues and call for assistance if equipment failed. These observatories became self-contained communities, small outposts of science perched between Earth and sky. The quality of observations from these mountain sites transformed astronomical research. Measurements became more precise, images more detailed, and the ability to detect faint objects greatly increased. Studies of stellar spectra benefited from the clearer, steadier light, allowing more accurate determination of stellar compositions and velocities. Planetary observers could map surface features with confidence, knowing they were seeing real details rather than atmospheric artifacts. The night sky, viewed from these elevated vantage points, revealed itself with a clarity that astronomers of previous generations could only have dreamed of achieving. As the decades progressed, observatory designers refined their understanding of ideal sites. They learned that proximity to oceans could create moisture and turbulence, that certain mountain peaks experienced more stable airflow than others, and that even local topography affected observing conditions. The science of site selection became increasingly sophisticated, with meteorological studies and atmospheric testing helping identify the very best locations for future telescopes. The quest for clearer, steadier air drove astronomers to ever more remote and challenging locations, always seeking that perfect window through which to view the cosmos. These mountaintop observatories, with their magnificent instruments poised above the haze and turbulence of lower elevations, represented more than just technological achievement. They embodied humanity's willingness to overcome substantial obstacles in pursuit of knowledge, to invest tremendous effort and resources simply to see more clearly into the depths of space. From these high perches, astronomers prepared to make discoveries that would fundamentally reshape our understanding of the universe itself, discoveries that the clearer air and steadier seeing made possible at last. As the 20th century dawned and observatories perched themselves on distant mountaintops, astronomers found themselves equipped with instruments of unprecedented power. The clear, steady air above the turbulent lower atmosphere had already proven its worth, and now the question became what mysteries these magnificent telescopes might reveal when pushed to their absolute limits. The year 1917 brought completion of a truly remarkable instrument atop Mount Wilson in California. The Hooker telescope, named for businessman John D. Hooker, who provided crucial funding, possessed a mirror 100 inches across. This enormous disc of glass, carefully ground and polished to exquisite precision, could gather more light than any telescope before it. The engineering required to mount and control such massive optics had tested the ingenuity of George Ellery Hale and his colleagues. But when the great dome finally opened and starlight fell upon that perfect mirror, a new era in astronomy quietly began. The telescope itself stood as a marvel of early 20th century craftsmanship. The mirror blank had been cast by the Saint-Gobain glassworks in France and shipped across the Atlantic during the early days of the First World War, narrowly avoiding the perils that threatened shipping in those troubled times. The grinding and polishing took years of patient work, transforming a rough disc into a surface so precisely curved that it deviated from perfection by mere millionths of an inch. The mounting allowed this delicate optical system to track smoothly across the heavens, compensating for Earth's rotation with mechanical grace. Yet the true power of this instrument would not lie simply in its size, but in what a particular astronomer would see when he looked through it on clear California nights. Edwin Hubble came to Mount Wilson in the early 1920s, a tall, athletic man who had studied law before following his passion for the stars. His calm demeanor and systematic approach to observation made him ideally suited for the patient work ahead. For years, astronomers had puzzled over the mysterious spiral nebulae scattered across the sky. These faint, fuzzy patches of light showed delicate pinwheel structures when viewed through powerful telescopes, but their true nature remained hotly debated. Were they relatively nearby clouds of gas within our own Milky Way galaxy? Perhaps new solar systems in the process of formation? Or could they be something far more profound? The question had sparked what became known as the Great Debate of 1920, when two prominent astronomers argued opposing views before the National Academy of Sciences. Harlow Shapley maintained that these spirals were nearby objects within our galaxy, while Heber Curtis proposed they were distant island universes, galaxies in their own right, lying far beyond the bounds of the Milky Way. Both men presented compelling arguments, but conclusive evidence remained elusive. Hubble turned the immense light-gathering power of the 100-inch telescope toward these enigmatic objects, focusing particularly on the Andromeda Nebula, that faint smudge visible to the naked eye on autumn evenings. Night after night, he captured photographic plates with long exposures, allowing the telescope to gather photons that had traveled unimaginable distances. When he examined these plates with painstaking care, individual stars began to emerge from what had appeared as merely a diffuse glow. Among these stars, Hubble identified something particularly significant: Cepheid variables. These special stars brightened and dimmed in regular cycles, and thanks to the earlier work of Henrietta Leavitt at Harvard, astronomers knew that the period of a Cepheid's variation was directly related to its true brightness. By measuring how long a Cepheid took to complete one cycle of brightening and fading, an astronomer could determine how luminous that star truly was. Comparing this intrinsic brightness to how dim the star appeared in the telescope revealed how far away it must be. The calculations told an astonishing story. The Cepheids Hubble found in the Andromeda Nebula were so faint, yet of a type that he knew burned brightly, that they must lie at a distance of hundreds of thousands of light years. This placed them far beyond even the most generous estimates of our galaxy's size. Andromeda was not a nebula within the Milky Way at all, but an entirely separate galaxy, a vast collection of hundreds of billions of stars lying across an ocean of space. The implications rippled through astronomy like waves from a stone dropped in still water. If Andromeda was a separate galaxy, then so too must be the other spiral nebulae scattered across the heavens. The universe was not simply our Milky Way galaxy surrounded by empty darkness, but a vast cosmos populated by countless galaxies, each containing billions of stars, each separated from its neighbors by distances that dwarfed anything previously imagined. Hubble announced his findings in 1924, and the astronomical community recognized immediately that humanity's conception of the universe had transformed forever. The cosmos had suddenly become almost incomprehensibly larger. Where once we had imagined ourselves in a galaxy that constituted the entire universe, we now found ourselves in merely one galaxy among multitudes. Adrift in a space so vast that light itself required millions of years to cross from one galaxy to another. But Hubble was not finished. Continuing his observations through the 1920s, he began measuring the spectra of these distant galaxies, analyzing how their light appeared, shifted toward the red end of the spectrum. This redshift indicated that galaxies were moving away from us, and the more distant the galaxy, the faster it appeared to recede. The universe itself was expanding, carrying galaxies away from one another, like raisins in rising bread dough. This discovery would lead to the understanding that the universe had a beginning, that it emerged from an incredibly dense, hot state billions of years ago, and has been expanding ever since. The 100-inch telescope had not merely shown us more stars or revealed new details of familiar objects. It had fundamentally reshaped our understanding of existence itself, revealing a dynamic, evolving cosmos of staggering age and size. The Great Telescope on Mount Wilson continued its work for decades, contributing to countless discoveries as astronomers explored this newly revealed universe. On clear nights, the dome would open and the enormous instrument would turn its mirror toward distant galaxies, gathering ancient light and adding piece by piece to humanity's growing understanding of the cosmos we inhabit. As observers worked through those nights, using this magnificent tool to peer into the depths of space and time, they followed a tradition stretching back through all the astronomers we have met in this story. From Galileo first turning his simple spyglass skyward, to Herschel grinding mirrors by hand. Each generation built upon the discoveries of those before, each advance in telescope design opening new windows on reality, each observation adding detail to our map of creation. The mountain observatory at Palomar, rising above the coastal hills of Southern California, represented a dream more than 2 decades in the making. As the 1920s drew to a close, George Ellery Hale, the visionary astronomer who had already overseen the creation of the world's largest telescopes at Yerkes and Mount Wilson, turned his thoughts to an even more ambitious project. He imagined a mirror twice the diameter of the Hooker telescope, a vast light-gathering surface that could peer deeper into space and time than ever before. The challenges of creating such an instrument seemed almost insurmountable. No one had ever cast a mirror disc 200 inches across, let alone figured out how to grind and polish its surface to the exacting precision required for astronomical observation. The mirror would need to maintain its perfect curve despite changes in temperature and the strain of being tilted in different directions as it tracked objects across the sky. Engineers and opticians gathered to solve problems that existed at the very edge of what seemed possible with 1930s technology. The Corning glass works in upstate New York took on the formidable task of casting the mirror blank. Rather than creating a solid disk that would weigh far too much and respond sluggishly to temperature changes, they developed a revolutionary design incorporating a honeycomb structure of ribs within the glass. This ribbed back would provide strength while dramatically reducing weight. The first attempt at casting in 1934 ended in disappointment when the supporting structure shifted during cooling, but the lessons learned proved invaluable. The second casting, completed later that year, emerged successfully from the enormous mold. The journey of this 20-ton glass disc from New York to California, became something of a public spectacle. The mirror traveled by rail at carefully controlled speeds, never exceeding 25 miles per hour, cushioned against vibration and protected from temperature extremes. People gathered at stations along the route to catch a glimpse of this remarkable cargo, this eye that would soon gaze into the depths of the cosmos. At the optical shop in Pasadena, skilled craftsmen began the painstaking work of grinding and polishing the glass surface. This process would consume 11 years, as workers gradually shaped the mirror to its required parabolic curve, precise to within millionths of an inch. The surface had to be so accurate that if the mirror was scaled up to the size of the Atlantic Ocean, no irregularity would rise higher than a few inches. Patient months turned into years as the opticians tested, ground and tested again, removing material grain by grain until the surface approached perfection. Meanwhile, on Palomar Mountain itself, construction crews carved a road up the steep slopes and prepared the summit for its massive dome. The telescope housing rose into the California sky, a structure 18 stories tall, designed to protect the delicate instrument while allowing the dome slit to open wide for observations. Inside, engineers assembled the intricate mounting and drive mechanisms that would allow the enormous telescope to track celestial objects with extraordinary precision, compensating for Earth's rotation with movement so smooth that long photographic exposures could capture incredibly faint and distant objects. The Second World War interrupted the final stages of completion, but in 1948, the Hale telescope, named in honor of its visionary creator, who had not lived to see its completion, opened its enormous eye to the universe. That first light, that initial test when starlight fell upon the carefully shaped mirror and came to focus, marked the beginning of a new era in observational astronomy. The timing proved remarkably fortunate. Astronomers stood at the threshold of revolutionary discoveries about the nature and history of the cosmos, and the Hale telescope provided exactly the tool they needed. Building upon Edwin Hubble's earlier work, revealing that the universe extended far beyond our galaxy and appeared to be expanding, observers using the 200-inch telescope began measuring the distances and velocities of galaxies so remote that their light had traveled for billions of years to reach Earth. These observations of distant galaxies presented astronomers with a remarkable gift. Because light takes time to travel through space, looking deeper into the cosmos meant looking backward in time. Galaxies, millions and billions of light years away, appeared as they had existed in the distant past, allowing astronomers to study the history and evolution of the universe itself. The light gathered by Palomar's Great Mirror became a time machine, revealing cosmic history written in starlight. The discoveries flowed steadily through the decades following the telescope's completion. Astronomers identified and catalogued thousands of galaxies, creating three-dimensional maps of cosmic structure that revealed how these island universes clustered together in groups and vast chains separated by enormous voids. The universe appeared to have a large-scale architecture, a cosmic web of matter spanning incomprehensible distances. Among the most puzzling discoveries were objects that appeared as faint, star-like points in photographs, but whose spectra revealed something extraordinary. These quasi-stellar objects, or quasars, exhibited tremendous redshifts, indicating they were racing away at substantial fractions of the speed of light. If these redshifts accurately indicated distance according to the expanding universe model, these objects must be incredibly far away, yet they shone brightly enough to be detected across billions of light years. The energy output required to accomplish this feat staggered the imagination, suggesting processes beyond anything observed in ordinary galaxies. The Hale telescope also contributed to understanding the chemical evolution of the cosmos. By analyzing the spectra of stars in different types of galaxies and at different distances, astronomers began to piece together how the elements formed. The lightest elements emerged from the hot, early universe, while heavier elements were forged in stellar furnaces and scattered into space by dying stars, gradually enriching the cosmos with the raw materials for planets and eventually life itself. Night after night, year after year, the Great Telescope continued its patient work, gathering ancient photons that had crossed unimaginable gulfs of space. The astronomers who guided its gaze across the heavens worked in the cold darkness of the dome, often at the limits of what the human eye could see, even with such powerful assistance. Photography and later electronic detectors extended observations beyond visual wavelengths. But the fundamental purpose remained unchanged: collecting light, focusing it, and recording what messages it carried from the distant universe. As new telescopes joined the quest, both on other mountaintops and eventually in space itself, the Hale telescope remained a productive instrument, its great mirror still gathering light decades after first opening to the stars. It represented a pinnacle of what could be achieved from the ground, and a bridge connecting the pioneering observations of the early 20th century to the space age that would soon dawn. As the great optical telescopes on their mountain perches continued their silent vigil, peering ever deeper into the visible cosmos, a completely different kind of astronomy was being born in laboratories and fields far from traditional observatories. This new vision would not depend on mirrors or lenses, on polished glass, or the clarity of high-altitude air. Instead, it would harness invisible waves that had been washing over Earth since the dawn of time, unnoticed by human senses, carrying messages from the universe that no optical telescope could ever detect. The story begins, as so many scientific discoveries do, with an unexpected observation. In the early 1930s, a young radio engineer named Carl Jansky worked for Bell Telephone Laboratories in New Jersey, investigating sources of static that interfered with radio communications. Bell was expanding transatlantic radio telephone service, and these mysterious crackles and hisses frustrated their efforts. Jansky built a curious contraption to track down the interference. A rotating antenna array mounted on wheels from an old Model T Ford, which locals dubbed the merry-go-round. As it slowly rotated, scanning the sky, Jansky meticulously catalogued every source of radio noise he could identify. He found thunderstorms, of course, and various terrestrial sources, but one persistent hiss puzzled him. It rose and fell with a regular rhythm, peaking about 4 minutes earlier each day. At first, Jansky thought this signal came from the sun, but as he continued his patient observations through 1932 and into 1933, he realized the truth was far more intriguing. The radio waves were coming from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, from the center of our Milky Way galaxy itself. the cosmos was broadcasting in wavelengths invisible to human eyes. Jansky published his findings in 1933, and while they attracted attention in the popular press, most astronomers at the time paid little heed. Their magnificent optical telescopes were revealing wonders enough, and the idea of building specialized instruments to detect radio emissions from space seemed exotic and perhaps unnecessary. But one man, captivated by Jansky's discovery, decided to pursue this new window on the universe with the dedication of a true amateur scientist. Grote Reber was a radio engineer and ham radio enthusiast living in Wheaton, Illinois. Fascinated by Jansky's work, Reber built the world's first true radio telescope in his backyard in 1937. It was a parabolic metal dish, 31 feet across, mounted so it could tilt to point at different parts of the sky. Night after night, while his neighbors slept, Reber collected radio emissions from the heavens, gradually creating the first radio map of the sky. He worked alone, funding his research from his own pocket, a solitary pioneer exploring a realm no one else was investigating. Reber's persistence revealed that radio emission came not just from the galactic center, but from discrete sources scattered across the sky. He published his radio maps in astronomy journals in the early 1940s, planting seeds that would eventually blossom into an entirely new field. But World War II intervened, and the development of radio astronomy had to wait while radar technology advanced rapidly under the pressures of military necessity. The war years, however, proved to be a blessing in disguise for radio astronomy. The massive investment in radar development created sophisticated radio receivers, powerful transmitters, and crucially, trained engineers who understood how to work wars with radio waves. When peace returned, this expertise and surplus equipment became available for peaceful purposes, and a handful of scientists recognized that the techniques used to detect aircraft could be adapted to listen to the cosmos. In England, a young physicist named Bernard Lovell began using radar equipment to study cosmic rays in 1945. His work at a remote field station near Jodrell Bank revealed mysterious radio echoes from the sky. What began as a temporary research facility gradually evolved into a major observatory as the potential of radio astronomy became clear. By the mid-1950s, Lovell had secured funding for an enormous radio telescope, a fully steerable dish 250 feet in diameter, an engineering marvel that pushed the limits of what was considered possible. Meanwhile, in Australia, a group led by Joseph Pawsey and later John Bolton used radio techniques to identify specific cosmic radio sources with unprecedented precision. In 1948, Bolton and his colleagues identified several of the strongest radio sources in the sky, including objects in the constellations Taurus and Centaurus. When optical astronomers finally examined these positions carefully, they found peculiar objects, including the Crab Nebula in Taurus, the expanding remnant of a supernova explosion witnessed by Chinese astronomers in 1054. The radio and optical views of the universe were beginning to complement each other, revealing that violent, energetic phenomena accompanied these strong radio emissions. The 1950s and 1960s saw radio astronomy flourish across the world. Large dishes sprouted from rural landscapes, their parabolic surfaces gathering faint radio whispers from across the cosmos. Unlike optical telescopes, radio telescopes could operate day and night, undeterred by clouds or daylight. They revealed a universe far more dynamic and energetic than the serene vista visible to optical instruments. In 1963, Dutch astronomer Martin Schmidt examined the optical spectrum of a radio source designated 3C273 and realized he was looking at something extraordinary. The object appeared star-like in photographs, but its spectrum showed familiar hydrogen lines shifted dramatically toward the red, indicating it was receding at tremendous velocity. When he calculated the distance this implied, Schmidt realized 3C273 was billions of light-years away, yet still bright enough to detect. This quasi-stellar radio source, or quasar, had to be producing the energy of hundreds of galaxies from a region smaller than our solar system. Radio astronomy had unveiled a completely new class of cosmic phenomena. Perhaps the most profound discovery made with radio telescopes came in 1965, when Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, working at Bell Labs with a sensitive horn antenna, detected a persistent background noise coming equally from all directions. After eliminating every possible source of interference, including, famously, pigeon droppings in their antenna, they realized they were detecting the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, the cosmic microwave background radiation that permeates all of space. This faint radio glow, the cooled remnant of the universe's fiery birth, provided powerful confirmation of the Big Bang theory and opened new ways to study the early universe. Radio astronomers also developed ingenious techniques to increase the resolving power of their instruments. By combining signals from multiple radio telescopes separated by large distances, a technique called interferometry, they could achieve the angular resolution of a single telescope as large as the separation between the dishes. Arrays of radio telescopes working in concert could discern details finer than any optical telescope, revealing the intricate structure of radio sources. In 1967, graduate student Jocelyn Bell, working with Anthony Hewish at Cambridge, noticed peculiar regular pulses in her radio data. Signals so precisely timed, they briefly raised the fanciful possibility of alien transmissions. These pulses, as they came to be called, turned out to be rapidly spinning neutron stars, the collapsed cores of massive stars. Their radio beams sweeping across space like cosmic lighthouses. Radio astronomy had revealed yet another exotic inhabitant of the universe. As the decades progressed, radio telescopes revealed magnificent structures invisible to optical instruments. Vast lobes of radio emission, extending millions of light years from active galaxies, powered by supermassive black holes. Complex molecules drifting in the space between stars. The detailed structure of stellar nurseries hidden behind obscuring dust. The radio spectrum had proven to be as rich and informative as the visible light that had captivated astronomers for centuries. And radio astronomy was just the beginning. Other invisible wavelengths beckoned, each offering unique insights into cosmic processes. But many of these wavelengths, absorbed by Earth's atmosphere, would require an even more dramatic step, lifting telescopes entirely above the air into the silent realm of space itself, where unobstructed views awaited across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The dream of placing a telescope above Earth's obscuring atmosphere had tantalized astronomers for generations. Throughout the 20th century, as aircraft climbed higher and rockets pushed beyond the sky itself, scientists imagined what wonders might be revealed if only their instruments could escape the blurring effects of air, moisture, and atmospheric turbulence. Every observation made from mountaintops, no matter how clear the night, was filtered through hundreds of miles of moving atmosphere that twisted and distorted the light from distant stars. The twinkling that makes starlight so poetic to observers on the ground was, to astronomers, a frustrating impediment to clarity. The space age brought this possibility within reach. Early satellites carried simple instruments that detected wavelengths blocked entirely by Earth's atmosphere, revealing a universe that radiated energy across the full electromagnetic spectrum. These pioneering space observatories were modest affairs, but they demonstrated the extraordinary potential of observing from the silent vacuum beyond our protective envelope of air. The concept that would become the Hubble Space Telescope began taking shape in the 1970s, though the road to its launch would prove long and complex. Astronomers envisioned a large optical telescope that would orbit Earth, combining the light-gathering power of ground-based instruments with the crystalline clarity only space could provide. The engineering challenges were formidable. Unlike mountaintop observatories where technicians could make adjustments and repairs, this telescope would operate in the harsh environment of space, subjected to extreme temperature swings and the degrading effects of radiation. The telescope was named for Edwin Hubble, whose observations had revealed the expanding universe decades earlier. Its primary mirror measured 94 inches across, smaller than the giants on mountaintops, but perfectly figured to a precision that would have astonished earlier generations of mirror makers. Every surface was shaped to within a tiny fraction of the wavelength of light itself. On April 24, 1990, the Space Shuttle Discovery carried the Hubble Space Telescope into orbit 240 miles above Earth's surface. The deployment of the observatory from the shuttle's cargo bay marked a new era in astronomical observation. As the telescope began its endless circling of our planet, astronomers eagerly awaited the first images from this unprecedented instrument. The initial euphoria, however, gave way to dismay when early images revealed a significant problem. Despite all the precision engineering, a flaw in the primary mirror's shape created a subtle distortion called spherical aberration. The telescope could see faint objects but couldn't focus them sharply. Instead of rendering crisp images, it produced views with fuzzy halos around stars. The error was minute. The mirror's edge was too flat by approximately 1/50th the width of a human hair. But at the precision required for space astronomy, this was catastrophic. The engineering teams on the ground quickly understood what had happened and, more importantly, they devised a solution. Because the Hubble had been designed from the beginning to be serviced by astronauts, corrective optics could be installed during a repair mission. In December 1993, shuttle astronauts conducted a series of spacewalks, installing instruments that compensated for the mirror flaw with additional precisely shaped optics. It was akin to fitting the telescope with glasses. When the repaired Hubble returned to operation, it fulfilled its promise spectacularly. Images of unprecedented sharpness began flowing back to Earth, revealing details in celestial objects that had remained hidden throughout all the centuries of astronomical observation. The telescope could distinguish features that would appear blurred together from even the finest mountaintop observatory. The Hubble peered into stellar nurseries where new stars were being born, capturing images of pillars of gas and dust sculpted by radiation and stellar winds. It observed the deaths of stars, imaging the delicate shells of gas expanding away from stellar remnants. Distant galaxies appeared in their billions in deep exposures that revealed the universe's structure across vast reaches of space and time. One of the telescope's most famous observations came when astronomers pointed it at what seemed to be an empty patch of sky in the constellation Fornax, allowing it to gather light for many days. The resulting image, known as the Hubble Deep Field, revealed thousands of galaxies scattered across that tiny region. Subsequent deep observations showed that everywhere we look, beyond our nearby cosmic neighborhood, galaxies extend in every direction across distances so vast that their light has traveled for billions of years to reach us. The Hubble Space Telescope was not alone in space for long. Other observatories joined it in orbit, each designed to observe wavelengths invisible to human eyes. The Chandra X-ray Observatory, launched in 1999, revealed the high-energy universe of black holes, neutron stars, and hot gas in galaxy clusters. The Spitzer Space Telescope, launched in 2003, observed in infrared wavelengths, peering through dust clouds to see objects whose heat radiation tells stories hidden from visible light. These space-based observatories worked in concert with ever-improving instruments on the ground, creating a comprehensive view of the cosmos across the electromagnetic spectrum. Each wavelength revealed different aspects of celestial objects, like examining a sculpture under different kinds of illumination. The James Webb Space Telescope, launched in late 2021, represented the next generation of space astronomy. With a primary mirror 21 feet across, composed of 18 hexagonal segments that unfolded after launch, and instruments optimized for infrared observation, this observatory stationed itself nearly 1 million miles from Earth. Its location and design allow it to observe the most distant galaxies, those whose light has been stretched to infrared wavelengths by the expansion of the universe, showing us what galaxies looked like when the universe was young. As we rest here in the quietness of evening, consider the journey we've traced together through these chapters, from ancient observers marking the positions of planets against the background stars, through the first Dutch perspective glasses, to Galileo's revelation of moons circling Jupiter, to Herschel's discovery of Uranus, to photographs capturing light invisible to our eyes, to Edwin Hubble revealing island universes beyond our Milky Way, and finally to observatories circling overhead in the darkness of space. Each generation built upon the insights of those who came before. Telescopes have transformed our understanding of our place in the cosmos. We now know we inhabit a planet orbiting an ordinary star in the outer regions of a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of suns in a universe populated by hundreds of billions of galaxies, all expanding away from each other through space that began in a hot, dense state nearly 14 billion years ago. These instruments, these gatherers of ancient light, connect us across the vastness of space and time to distant worlds and cosmic events. They have shown us the universe is far stranger, more beautiful and more magnificent than our ancestors could have imagined. And yet, for all we have learned, each discovery reveals new mysteries, new questions, new horizons beckoning us forward into deeper understanding. The story of telescopes is not finished. It continues every clear night, every moment that light from distant stars streams through carefully figured glass and polished mirrors. whispering secrets from the depths of space and time. As we bring to a close our journey through the remarkable story of telescopes and the visionaries who unveiled the cosmos, we hope these tales of discovery have gently carried you through the evening. From those first glimpses of distant worlds to the profound revelations that reshaped our place in the universe, may these peaceful reflections settle softly in your mind. Thank you for joining us on this quiet exploration among the stars. If this calm adventure has brought you comfort, we'd love to have you with us again. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. And now, as the night deepens and your mind settles, we wish you the sweetest of dreams. Good night, fellow dreamer, and may your sleep be restful and your dreams be kind.